This was never a marriage, it was a psychological hostage situation disguised as a wedding. Dominic Varley may be the visible predator in the room, but the deeper pathology belongs to Serafina's father, a narcissistic manipulator willing to monetize his own daughter's body and call it family duty. Serafina enters the marriage already conditioned for obedience, fear, and survival. That is what makes the story so disturbing. Not just that she was sold, but that she was trained to believe submission was love.
Dominic Varley's dominion was forged from meticulous fear and bargains sealed with violence. He never ceded an inch until his new bride flinched from his very presence. This marriage was engineered as a stark transaction: sign the document, secure the alliance, take possession of the prize. Yet Serafina Vale was no simple asset. She was a sacrifice, delivered to an altar for slaughter. As this truth dawned on Dominic, he faced an elemental choice: to take what was his by contract, or to tear down the brutal world he had built. It was a choice that would inevitably leave them both in ruins. And this is an examination of the aftermath. The Armory Club was a festering sore on the spirit of Lower Manhattan, a wound that would not heal. Inside its confines of polished dark wood and blood-red velvet, it served as a forge for men whose aspirations withered in daylight. At its heart was Dominic Varley, his glass untouched, his eyes consuming the entire room. He had reigned over this establishment for 6 years, and its clientele for much longer. "You're wound tight," Marcus Chen noted, Dominic's closest advisor and the steady whisper of his conscience. "This is a pivotal night." "It is just a signature." Dominic's voice was flat without emotion. "No different from any other agreement, except this one stipulates a bride." Dominic stayed silent. The marriage agreement had been a brutal 3-month siege. The Vale family controlled shipping lanes through 5 critical ports, the very lifelines for Dominic's expansion. Serafina's father, Aldo Vale, facing financial collapse, had presented his daughter as flesh and blood collateral. A cold, calculated move. Marcus watched him. "Have you actually met Serafina?" "Once, 2 years ago, at some charity gala." Dominic scanned his memory for her image, finding only a blank space. "She said nothing." "And still you go through with it." "I'm gaining a strategic position. The woman is merely a clause in the contract." Even to his own ears, the justification sounded like a lie. But Dominic had built his entire world on such merciless arithmetic. Emotion to him was a corrupting variable. Affection was a weakness for enemies to exploit, a harsh tenet taught by a father who saw his children as tools and love as a fatal flaw. The club's doors opened. Aldo Vale strode in, flanked by 2 retainers, their expressions worn with desperation. Aldo looked smaller than before, his expensive suit draping a frame shrunken by dread. "Varley?" Aldo's handshake was unnaturally firm, a desperate pantomime of power he had long since lost. "Everything is prepared. Serafina is waiting. My lawyers approved the final terms this morning." The smile on Aldo's face was a hollow mask, his eyes devoid of warmth. "You'll have command of the shipping routes within 48 hours. And Serafina, she is fully aware of her duties." A strange note in that phrasing disturbed Dominic, a dissonance he decided to push aside. "Our business is concluded then." "Nearly." Aldo gestured to the private elevator. "The ceremony is in 20 minutes. A small gathering as arranged, close family only." Dominic gave a sharp, definitive nod. He had insisted on privacy. The lack of spectacle helped frame it as the commercial deal it was. The elevator rose in a heavy, suffocating silence. When the doors opened, Dominic stepped into a place of profound cognitive dissonance. The Armory's penthouse was twisted into a bizarre imitation of a chapel. White flowers and dim lighting cast an antiseptic sheen on rows of neat chairs. The few guests present went quiet as Dominic entered. He registered Victor, his head of security, by the window, and Aunt Teresa, the only family he tolerated, who watched him with an expression of deep sorrow. The rest were Vales, their family and allies, all staring with a terror they barely concealed. Good. Fear made them predictable. An older woman, likely Aldo's wife, stepped forward. "Mr. Varley, I am Catherine Vale. We met once, a long time ago." "Mrs. Vale?" Dominic's nod was brief. "Serafina will be here soon." "She's just—" Catherine's hands clenched into a knot. "She's a bit overwhelmed. It has all happened so quickly for her." "We all understand the terms of this deal." Dominic's tone was glacial. "I expect she understands her obligations." Catherine visibly flinched. "She understands her duty." The word landed in Dominic's stomach like a cold, heavy weight, a feeling he could not place. Marcus appeared with 2 glasses of champagne. "To the happy couple," he said, his tone perfectly flat. He offered one to Dominic, who set it down on a table, untouched. "Where is the man performing the service?" "Judge Morrison is here. A favor for Aldo," Marcus said quietly. "Are you sure about this? There's still time to—" "It's done." Dominic cut him off. "The deal is signed." "Deals can be broken." Dominic spun to face his friend. "Why are you fighting me on this?" "Because in the 20 years I've known you, I've never seen you so utterly disconnected from an action. And that's saying something." Marcus met his glare without flinching. "This isn't a shipment of goods or a hostile takeover. This is a person. A person who agreed to the terms." "Did she?" Marcus asked, his voice low. "Or did her father agree for her?" Before Dominic could reply, the energy in the room shifted. His eyes locked on a doorway at the end of the hall, and for a beat, he forgot to breathe. Serafina Vale stood there, a spectral vision, nothing like the hazy memory he possessed. 2 years ago, she had been a nameless face in a ballroom, unimportant. Now, a simple white dress seemed not to adorn, but to devour her. Dark hair was pulled from a face so pale it was almost luminous. Her eyes, however, were what seized him. They were abysses of raw, undiluted terror. It was not a fear of him specifically, but of the very air she was forced to breathe. Her gaze darted around, the desperate scan of a caged animal for an escape route. Her hands were strangling a small bouquet, knuckles showing bone white. When Catherine reached to smooth her dress, Serafina recoiled so violently that the entire room fell dead silent. This was not a case of a bride's jitters. This was a display of pure, systemic terror. A fault line opened deep inside Dominic, a protective instinct he immediately crushed. This was the deal. She knew the terms. Her fear was her problem to solve. Yet as Aldo grabbed her arm to lead her forward, Serafina stumbled. His grip tightened into a vice, yanking her with a cruel tug, and Dominic saw her bite down on her lip until a drop of blood bloomed. A powerful tremor shook her entire body. The ceremony passed in a gray, indistinct fog. Judge Morrison spoke words intended to give the grotesque theater a gloss of legitimacy. Dominic recited his own vows in a mechanical drone. When the judge turned to Serafina, the silence that followed felt infinite. Her voice broke into pieces. She tried once more. "I do." It was the sound of total surrender. The judge pronounced them married. He was supposed to kiss her. But as Dominic leaned in, Serafina wrenched her head aside so sharply his lips brushed her cheek. Her body was as rigid as stone. A thin, half-hearted patter of applause echoed in the room. Aldo was beaming. Catherine looked destroyed. Marcus seemed ready to say something he could never take back. And Serafina, she looked as if a strong wind could turn her to ash. The reception was mercifully short, since Dominic had banned music, cake, or any other pretense of celebration. What remained was an hour of forced conversation around food and drink that no one touched, while Serafina sat frozen in a chair by the wall, a remote peninsula of silent agony. He watched her from across the room. She hadn't moved in 20 minutes, speaking to no one. Her mother tried once, whispering something that brought a sheen of tears to Serafina's eyes, which she refused to let fall. "She's afraid of you," Victor said, appearing at his side. "She knows nothing about me." "That might be the very reason." Victor had been with Dominic for 15 years, earning the right to be blunt. "You know the stories they tell about you. The legend. I don't care about gossip." "You should, especially when your new wife sees you as her executioner." Dominic's jaw tightened. "She'll adjust." "Will she?" The question from Victor hung in the room, heavy with doubt. "Or will she just learn to suffer more quietly?" Before Dominic could answer, Aldo materialized, wearing a politician's smile and the glassy stare of a drunk. "Well, Varley, congratulations. I'm sure you'll take excellent care of my girl." The wording, as if Serafina were a classic car he'd just offloaded, kindled a frigid rage deep inside Dominic. "The shipping lanes are yours tomorrow." Aldo's grin widened at that. "The documents are ready. You'll have full control by noon. And Serafina, well, she comes with her own set of instructions." Her father, Aldo, presents her less as a daughter and more as a masterwork, honed for obedience. He details her duties as if listing specifications, a credit to her mother's conditioning. A wave of disgust crests in Dominic, his fists clenching. His clipped dismissal, "Our business is concluded," fails to sever the deal. Aldo's echoing laugh seals it. As the man leaves, a raw, violent urge grips Dominic. His lieutenant, Victor, murmurs a useless caution, "Boss, give her a moment." But Dominic's reply, "I know what this is," feels like a lie. He is a designer staring at a plan he no longer understands. He had expected a queen for his violent chessboard, a woman tempered in the same fires of brutality. He got a terrified child whose eyes painted him the villain from her darkest tales, a portrait he found unnervingly true. As the evening's pretense dissolved, his guests' congratulations became hushed condolences. Marcus, a man of cold pragmatism, gave his judgment in a low growl. "I will say this only once. The girl is fractured with fear. Whatever you intend for tonight is not your affair." "It becomes my affair when I see choices that leave permanent scars." Marcus's gaze was like stone. "You won the shipping lanes. The victory is yours. Do not crush her spirit just because you can. Even creatures like us have lines we will not cross. Go!" Marcus's exit was a silent condemnation that hollowed the room. Soon, it was only Dominic, Serafina, and Victor. Sensing the crushing weight in the air, Victor withdrew, citing security. A profound, suffocating silence fell. Serafina sat frozen, her gaze locked the gold ring on her finger, a manacle Dominic had selected with cold indifference. Her breathing was a frantic, shallow cadence. Dominic moved toward her slowly, like one might stalk a trapped animal. "It is time." His voice was an intrusion, and she flinched, rising on unsteady legs. She would not meet his eyes. Perhaps she could not. His black Mercedes was outside, a purring monument to his dominance. Victor opened the door, and Serafina fled into the back, cramming herself against the far window. Dominic entered after her, the door shutting with the heavy thud of a vault. They crossed Manhattan enveloped in a total stillness. The city light slid across her face, illuminating the wet tracks of tears she had stopped hiding. It was the expression of complete surrender. Serafina. His voice cracked the silence. She jolted. Look at me. With excruciating slowness, she did. Her eyes found his for the first time since the vows, and the utter void in them hit him like a blow. It was not just fear, but a chilling resignation, an acceptance of the horror she was certain would come. I will not hurt you. The words were meaningless air against her training. Do you understand? I understand my function, she cut in, her voice a brittle whisper. My mother was clear. I know what is required of me. The lifeless, mechanical tone of her words twisted in his gut. What exactly did she tell you? That I belong to you now, that I must. Her voice frayed, her breath catching. That my purpose is to follow your orders. That my duty is to satisfy you, to never fight, to be. Her voice broke. To be good. A cold rage, not for her, but for Aldo and her mother, flared inside Dominic. They had made her a condition of a contract, teaching her that compliance was her only worth. They told you that you are my property. Is that right? Her frightened eyes stayed on his. You bought me. My father made the terms. You get the shipping lanes and you get me. My family is secure. That is the bargain, Serafina. I am not a fool, Mr. Varley. Tears streamed freely down her face now. I know what men in your world do. I have heard the tales. I know what you are, and I know I have no choice. So I will do my duties. I will be what you need. Her voice then cracked into a raw, desperate plea. Just please do not cause more pain than you must. The car stopped before Dominic's building, a dark tower of glass and steel. He usually saw it with pride. Tonight it looked like a prison. Victor opened her door. Serafina stood on trembling legs, and as Dominic's hand grazed her elbow, she recoiled so violently she almost fell. They rose in the private elevator, wrapped in a smothering quiet. Serafina's gaze was glued to the floor, counting the seconds of this final procession. The doors opened to his home, a bleak panorama of concrete, brick, and glass over the Hudson. It was a space built to intimidate. Through her terror, Dominic saw only its desolate coldness. She stopped at the entrance, a statue of pure dread. The bedrooms are that way, Dominic motioned. Your things are in the closet. She gave a tiny, mute nod. Are you hungry? I can have something sent up. Another silent gesture of assent. She gave him nothing. A tide of frustration rose in Dominic. He handled deadly treaties, but was unprepared for this broken girl who saw a monster in his face. Maybe she was just seeing the truth. Serafina. He tried to gentle his voice, but it came out sharp. You have to eat. You barely ate at dinner. I am not hungry, she said, her voice a hollow sound. When was the last time you ate? Silence was her reply. Serafina. Yesterday morning, she admitted, her tone lifeless. I could not. I have been sick since I learned of the deal. Food just... She hugged her arms to her chest. It does not matter. I am fine. She was anything but fine. A harsh shudder ran through her, her teeth chattering. When Dominic stepped toward her, she scrambled back until she hit the wall. Primal panic lit her eyes. He stopped, holding his hands up, palms out. "I'm not going to touch you." "But you will," she whispered as new tears fell. "It is supposed to happen. That is the point of tonight, yes. The agreement it requires." She choked on the term, "consummation." Dominic spoke the word she could not and saw her flinch at the sound. "So, that is your understanding of this." And that was it, the cold, unspoken foundation of their marriage. The contract had clauses on heirs and obligations, duties to be fulfilled with or without consent. Dominic had barely scanned them, seeing them as old-world formalities. He had assumed Serafina was a player who understood the rules, who had her own motives. He never foresaw this level of sheer, soul-deep terror. He never thought he would feel like a hunter cornering its kill. "Go to your room," he said finally. "Shower, change your clothes. I will have food brought to you." And then, her voice was a ghost. "Then you will eat and you will sleep, nothing more." She was not convinced. "My mother said the first night, it is crucial that I have to, that we must." The shaking grew worse. "She said if I do not, my father loses everything, that you could void the deal, that our family would be—" "Your mother is mistaken." Dominic's voice was sharper than he meant. "Go to your bedroom, Serafina, go." She was gone, the door clicking behind her. Dominic stood alone in his vast, empty room, fighting an impulse to break something. The whole affair, the pact, the wedding, the union, had seemed so direct on paper. Get the roots, secure an alliance, take a wife, consolidate power. He had never considered the bride would be a person. His phone buzzed. It was Marcus. "So, how is the married life?" The question was a deliberate barb. "Not so bad." Dominic walked in the window. "She is scared of me, utterly terrified. She thinks I am going to—" He could not finish the sentence. "Well, are you?" Marcus fired back. "For God's sake, Marcus. I ask because you signed a paper giving you that power, and I know you. Everything is leverage. Everyone's a tool. So, as your friend, what is your next move?" Dominic shut his eyes. "I do not know. You should figure it out, and fast, because that girl isn't a detail in a deal. She is human. If you treat her like an asset, you will destroy her, and maybe yourself." "When did you become my conscience?" "Since I watched you become someone I barely know over these last 5 years." "You once had lines you would not cross." "Dom, make sure this isn't one of them." Marcus hung up. Dominic had food sent up that he knew Serafina would not eat. When it came, he knocked on her door. Nothing. "Serafina, I have left food here for you. You should eat." Still, only silence replied. He waited, hearing just the apartment's clinical quiet, then left. An hour later, he looked again. The tray was untouched. Dominic spent the night in his office, staring at data he knew by heart, anything to avoid the reality of the terrified girl in his home. At dawn, he was no nearer an answer. After he left, a sepulchral silence claimed the penthouse. Her door stayed closed. The food he'd left had vanished, but whether eaten or thrown away was unknown. His day was a relentless assault, attorneys, security updates with Victor, and the clinical dismantling of a supplier. Dominic executed his part flawlessly, yet his mind was elsewhere. Later that night, he found Serafina in the kitchen. In denim and a large sweater, she looked jarringly young. With her hair still wet, she was ineptly trying to cook. Every gesture she made was tentative and unsure. "You have no need to do this." His words cut through the stillness. She flinched hard. The blade rattled on the countertop. I employ people for this. I wanted to, she whispered, her gaze lost on the ruined vegetables. I thought I should. My mother taught me it was my place to. Your mother was wrong about a great many things. Serafina could only wring her hands together. I don't know what is expected of me. When Dominic moved closer, she shrank back, the island a shield between them. So quick to fear, so ready to flee. I need you to look at me and not see a beast. I'm trying, she breathed, her voice about to splinter. Truly I am, but I feel adrift. I have no grasp of my purpose in this place. She hid her face from him. This life is alien to me. I don't understand the duties of a wife or your needs. I am terrified I'll disappoint you, and then you will. I will what? I don't know. The confession tore from her throat. I can't predict how you'll react if I fail. Will you throw me away? Will you hurt me? There are no rules here. Just this suffocating fear, this cage. I can't breathe. Her speech collapsed into a full-blown panic, each ragged gasp making her body shudder. He moved on pure instinct, stepping toward her, but she scrambled back so violently she hit the counter. Don't touch me, she cried out. Please don't. I can't. I just can't. She slid to the floor, curling into a ball against the cabinets, gasping for air. It was a complete psychic break, her mind consumed by pure terror. Dominic stood frozen, a witness to her fracturing, rendered utterly powerless. His every instinct screamed to take command, to extinguish her pain. Yet he was the source. One does not simply order away such primal dread. Serafina, his voice was low, controlled. Look at me. I need you to open your eyes. But she couldn't. They were squeezed shut, tears carving trails down her cheeks as she shook. I will not make contact with you. I am staying right here. You are safe. Do you hear me? You are safe. I'm not, she choked out between frantic breaths. I'll never be safe. I am yours. My father traded me and you bought me. I have no choice. No way out. I can't breathe. Dominic sank carefully to the floor, keeping a wide space between them. Breathe in your nose, out your mouth, follow my lead. He showed her, his own breathing deep and even. After some time, she tried to copy him. A long pause hung in the air before her breathing started to steady, the wave of panic finally starting to ebb. I'm sorry. Her eyes were fixed on the tile. I am so sorry. I shouldn't have. I was told to be quiet, to be agreeable, to cause no trouble. But I am failing. The apologies just kept tumbling out of her. But Serafina. He let the silence stretch until her gaze at last met his. What exactly did they tell you about me? She worried her lower lip. That you are a dangerous man, that you have killed, that the city is terrified of you, that you always get what you want no matter the price, that if I'm not able to... She trailed off. If you are not able to do what? If I cannot make you happy, you might ruin my family. The contract gives you power over them. It's my job to ensure this alliance works. A sharp, cold fury kindled in Dominic. Aldo had armed himself with his daughter's dread, teaching her that her only value was placating a monster. Your family used you, he said, his voice sharp. They put you in an impossible bind and called it your duty. They convinced you that you were their salvation. That isn't protection, Serafina, that's cowardice. They had no other way. We were losing everything. My father's debts, legal issues, threats from... She caught herself aware she'd said too much. From whom? She merely shook her head. Serafina, who was making threats against your family. It doesn't matter anymore. You have the shipping lanes. You can protect us from anyone who... Once more, she went quiet. For Dominic, the pieces were falling into a hideous shape. Her father was not just broke, he had powerful enemies. And instead of facing them, he had used his daughter as a shield. He wanted to protect us. He was protecting himself. Don't, she trembled. Please don't say that. He's my father. He's still... She couldn't finish the thought. They both knew. Aldo Valle had sacrificed his own child to save his skin, wrapping the betrayal in the guise of honor and love. How old are you? The question was sudden. 22. And this whole deal, how long has this been planned? I don't know for sure. A few months. They only told me 2 weeks ago. She hugged her knees closer to her chest. My mother explained it all. The debt, the threats, the marriage terms. She said this was the one solution, my duty as the oldest. You have sisters, 2 younger ones, they're still in school. A new light ignited in her eyes, one of fierce defense. They can't know. They think I'm marrying for love, because this is... She let out a harsh laugh. A romance. And what do they know about me? Nothing real. Only that you are powerful and successful. My mother spun a story that was almost respectable. Serafina swiped at her face with her sleeve. They have no idea about your real business, about what you really are. And what am I? She looked him straight in the eye, and in her reflection, Dominic saw himself, the builder of a violent empire, a conqueror, a man everyone feared, a man who had just acquired a terrified young woman for her strategic worth. I don't know, she whispered. That's the most frightening part. I don't know who you are, what you want, or what you might do. I just know there is no way out. The words hung between them, a cold, unchangeable fact. Dominic got to his feet slowly. Stand up. Fear flickered in her eyes, but she obeyed, getting up on shaky legs. Go back to your room, please. Serafina, just go to your room. Lock the door. I'll take the guest suite. He pulled out his phone. I am ordering food. Real food, not whatever that was. It will be left by your door. You are to eat it all. Then you will sleep. That is it. No duties, no contract, no expectations, just sleep. Do you understand? She gave a nearly invisible nod, as if unable to absorb the order. Tomorrow, we will go over the actual conditions of this arrangement, the rules. But for tonight, your only job is to rest. He held her gaze for a second. Can you do that? I think so. Good. Now go. And she left. This time, the click of the lock sounded less like imprisonment and more like relief. Dominic ordered food for 3 people, choosing dishes he thought she might actually eat. He set it outside her door and rapped his knuckles once. He heard her collect it 20 minutes later. After an hour, he checked. The tray was gone. A small victory. He stayed in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, questioning every single move. The deal was done. The shipping lanes were his. He had won the prize. Or so he had thought. What he'd really gotten was a broken young woman, sold off to save a coward. The whole arrangement now painted him as more of a monster than any of his past deeds. This marriage felt less like a tactical victory and more like a mutual prison sentence. And in the room across the hall, Serafina was surely still awake, fearing the dawn, seeing his kindness as just a new prelude to some more devious cruelty. His entire empire was built on his skill at reading others, exploiting their weaknesses, and taking what he wanted. But to be the singular cause of someone else's complete terror was never his goal. He had never meant to become the demon in a young woman's mind. The real question was if he could now become something else. Or was he too far gone, a man whose kindness looked just like another weapon? There were no answers, only more questions multiplying in the quiet. He was left with the stark realization that he hadn't bought an asset. He had bought a person's paralyzing fear. And for the very first time, Dominic Farley had absolute power over another soul, and no idea how to use it. Morning came with a brutal swiftness. Sleep gave Dominic no solace. Just 2 hours of racing thoughts before a gray dawn broke. By 6 o'clock, he was in the kitchen holding coffee he didn't want, letting the heavy silence press in. He wondered if Serafina had slept at all. Her door opened at 7:30. She was wearing dark jeans and a plain sweater, her hair pulled back. The fatigue was carved into her features, but she had managed to gather herself into a fragile sort of composure. "Good morning," her voice was low and proper. "Morning," Dominic gestured to the coffee. "Would you care for any?" She shook her head, then seemed to change her mind. "Yes, actually, please." He poured the coffee, watching the cup tremble in her grasp as she stirred in cream and sugar. Her focus was a fixed point over his shoulder, a deliberate evasion of his eyes. When he asked if she'd eaten, her reply was a terse, "Yes, I'm fine," followed by a flinch from the cup's warmth. She insisted it was too hot, even after drinking most of it. Between them, the kitchen island stood like a silent barricade. The city outside was waking, but inside, the quiet was a suffocating pressure. And then Dominic broke it. "We have to talk, for real this time." There would be no encore of the previous night's brittle standoff. No more reciting the lines her parents had coached her to say. Just the raw, unforgiving truth. Serafina's knuckles turned white against the ceramic. "Fine." He told her to sit, and she picked a seat at the farthest end of the table. Every nerve ending screamed for an escape route. Dominic, however, kept standing, circling like a caged animal. "I'm going to ask you things, and you're going to answer them directly. Do you understand?" "I can try." And then he unleashed the fatal question. "Did you want to marry me?" There it was. A faint, broken sound left her lips. No. She had wanted no part of this. Her father had wielded her guilt like a craftsman, whispering of obligations and hidden threats, painting this marriage as the only thing that could save their family. He had built a world where her descent would make her the sole reason for their downfall. And her mother, she had offered a grim education on a wife's duties and his likely appetites. She had made it painfully clear that if Serafina failed to please him, every one of them would pay the price. An Arctic rage began to crystallize inside Dominic again. "Your parents sold you like property, then made you feel guilty for the sale." "They were desperate," she whispered. "They were cowards." She tried to argue for them, but he cut her off. "They hid behind you, Serafina. They used you as a human shield. That isn't love." She shot back. "And what would you know about love?" Then immediately shrank from her own boldness. His voice stayed level. "I know nothing about it, but I know what exploitation looks like. And your father used you as collateral for his own mistakes." Serafina shoots to her feet so fast the chair legs scrape violently on the floor. You don't understand the circumstances. My family was falling apart. My father's life was in danger. She had been sold a story where she was the heroine, the single element that could make things right. What was I supposed to say? No? And Dominic, with the cold precision of a scalpel, answers without pause, yes. The right answer was no. The right answer was to let your father clean up his own goddamn mess. She scoffs. That's easy for you to say. You have all the power. I had a duty. She is a willing prisoner in the temple of her own martyrdom. 2 younger sisters to protect, a family name to uphold. What kind of monster would I be to just walk away from them? He counters. Maybe one who understands her own life has value. But she is trapped by her upbringing. My life isn't more important than theirs. The statement hangs between them, a perfect summary of her self-destruction. Dominic was looking at a woman who had been meticulously trained to believe that love meant self-annihilation. When he asks who taught her that, she answers, nobody had to. It's just the way things are. When Dominic moves to close the space between them, she flinches back. He stops, holding his hands up as if to show he is unarmed. I'm not going to touch you, but you need to hear this. It was then he laid out the true, ugly foundation of their arrangement. Your father wasn't just buying protection, he engineered a deal, your life in exchange for his profit. He listed the cold facts. The shipping lanes worth millions, the power of the alliance, the new territory. Your father didn't just get out of debt, Serafina. He got rich by selling you. She winces, her spirit refusing to accept such a core betrayal. He traded you for $3 million and a cut of all future profits, he says flatly. That's not a desperate man trying to survive. That's a businessman closing a deal. Serafina sinks back into the chair as if her bones could no longer support her. He pulls out his phone and opens the contract. See for yourself. Page 14, Section 7, the payment schedule. She stares at the screen like it's a venomous snake ready to strike before she takes it. Her eyes scan the words, and you can see the exact instant her world shatters. Her entire expression just evaporates. Please stop, she whispers, pushing the phone back at him. Don't apologize. You were just telling me the truth. But fresh tears cut new tracks down her cheeks. This wasn't the look of fear anymore. This was the pure, unfiltered sound of grief. It was the death of the one idea that gave her sacrifice meaning. He sold me, she says, the words making it real, like an object, like I was nothing. A hollow laugh escapes her. My own father put a price on my head. I guess that's the definition of nothing, isn't it? And for the first time, Dominic had nothing to say. Aldo had turned his daughter into an entry on a balance sheet, and Dominic had been on the other side of that transaction. I didn't know, he says, and the words taste like ash. When I signed, I was led to believe you were an equal partner in this agreement. And now? Now I know you were forced. I know you're terrified, and I know none of this is a weight you should have to bear. The contract, however, was still a chain. He let another piece of information fall. There's a dissolution clause in the contract. Her eyes snap to his. For one fragile second, a flicker of hope lights up her face. Then, just as fast, it dies. My sisters, what happens to them? The people threatening my father won't care if a contract is void. If she walked away, her family would be right back in the line of fire, and with that, her decision was made. She had to stay. You would stay in a marriage you hate just to protect them? They are 8 and 10 years old. Her conviction was a wall of steel. They don't deserve any of this. So yes, I will stay. I will do everything this piece of paper says I have to. All I want is your word that you will keep them safe. Something inside him visibly shifts. He sees the brutal elegance of her prison. She is trapped completely. Leaving condemns her sisters, staying destroys her soul. It was a flawless checkmate. Then he spoke. What if there's a third option? What if you stay, but we change the rules? She looked confused. Change them how? Dominic carefully explained the new terms. The law said they were married, but it said nothing about her having to live as a prisoner. We can make this manageable. He made his meaning plain. He would never force her to do anything. There would be no pretense of a wife's duties. She would live in his house. They would keep up appearances for the world, and her family would be secure. But in private, behind closed doors, she would be free. The word free sounded like it belonged to a language she'd never heard. That's hard to believe, she said. I know, he agreed. She studied his face, looking for the fine print, the lie she knew had to be there. Why would you do this? What's the catch? He listed the business advantages, the strategic sense it made, and then stopped. And maybe it's a chance to get some sleep without my conscience screaming at me. She wasn't buying it. You don't strike me as a man who loses sleep over his choices. I never have, he admitted. But watching you break last night, I wouldn't call that a win. You felt bad? I felt like a monster. Maybe that's what you are, she said, simply stating a fact. Or maybe we're both just trapped in the same machine. Maybe. As the city hummed its steady beat outside, they started to redesign the terms of her confinement. I'll need guarantees. Serafina's voice was different now, steady and hard, the tremble completely gone. If I'm staying, I need to know my sisters are safe. Not a promise, a fact. Done! They'll have a security team, invisible but absolute. And my father's debt, the men who were after him? As of yesterday, his lenders work for me now. To get to him, they'd have to go through me. Dominic's voice dropped, becoming almost intimate. Your sisters are untouchable. Your family is an asset I protect now, whether your father deserves it or not. What about the $3 million? His payment? Yes. What of it? Can you reclaim that money, ensure he loses every cent? A single eyebrow lifted, a silent, arching question. And for what reason would you wish for that? Because he will not profit from my sale. He will not walk away believing this was some masterful play. Her tone frosted over. He needs to learn the true cost of his actions. In that instant, Dominic saw it. The core of iron she had been taught to bury, a thing bent but never broken. I can make that happen, but it will financially ruin your family. Good. Let him be ruined. Let him learn desperation rather than cashing me in like an asset. For the first time, her gaze locked with his, direct and absolute. I will be the sacrifice for my sisters, but my father will not fund his life with it. Consider it done. Truly? Just like that? Just like that. Dominic retrieved his phone, his thumb tapping a directive to his legal counsel. By sunset, that payment becomes a crippling debt with punitive interest. He will curse the day he ever touched that money. A flicker of dark, cold satisfaction crossed Serafina's features. Thank you. Don't thank me. I am still the man who owns your contract. But you are also the man making this cage survivable. She clutched her coffee cup as if it were a stone anchor. And that is not nothing. The silence that settled between them was new. Not a battlefield, but a fragile, unspoken truce. I have questions, Serafina said, her voice soft. About you. About this world I've been pulled into. Then ask. The rumors about you, are any of them true? That depends on what you've heard. That you have killed, that you command a criminal empire, that you are a dangerous man. Dominic was left with a choice, the comforting lie or the brutal truth he'd promised her. Yes, all of it is true. She processed the confession without a change in expression. How many? The number of men I've killed? Yes. Are you certain you want that answer? I'm living with you. I am bound to you. I believe I deserve to know the man who has trapped me. A fair point. I stopped counting after the first few. A number of them were self-preservation. Some were for business. Some... His voice trailed into nothing. Some were because I was enraged or to make a statement. At times, it was simply the most direct solution. Do you feel regret? The question seemed to catch him completely by surprise. For some, for those who were undeserving, for those who were in the wrong place at the wrong time, but not for every one of them. No, not for all of them. Some people just need to be taken off the board. That is true. Serafina was quiet for a long moment. My father called you ruthless. He said you built this all on a foundation of violence and fear. He said it as a compliment. It's not strength. It's a survival tactic that became a sickness. What do you mean? Dominic stood and walked to the window, putting a gulf of space between them. I was brought up in a place where weakness was an invitation for attack, where emotion was a weapon you handed your enemies. The only way to live was to be harder, more savage, and more willing to do terrible things than everyone else. So, that's what I became. And it worked. I survived. I built this. I made myself the monster everyone feared instead of the boy being hurt. But somewhere on that path, survival became conquest. Fear became power, and I stopped asking if an act was moral, and just did it because no one could stop me. Because nobody was strong enough to get in my way. He turned from the window to face her. Your father was correct. I am ruthless. I am dangerous. And the things I've done would make you run from this room if you had anywhere to go. I'm not running. It would be the sensible thing to do. But I'm not. She rose and crossed toward the window, keeping a careful distance. Do you want to know what I think? What? I think you're saying all this to frighten me, to make me understand the scale of what you are, so I'll do what? Cower, behave, remember my place? She shook her head. But this is the reality. I've already hit my limit for fear. It can't get any worse, so maybe you can stop the performance and just be who you are. Dominic was silent, watching her. The woman who, just last night, was shaking too hard to stand was now meeting his power with an icy calm. You have a strength I clearly misjudged. My father saw me as a pretty object, quiet, valuable as a trade. But I am not stupid. I have spent a lifetime watching from the sidelines, learning. She folded her arms across her chest. So do not treat me like some naive child. I know what you are. I see this world for what it is. I am just trying to learn the rules, to survive inside it. A fair goal. Dominic went back to his chair. Then we'll have the truth. No theatrics. I built my world with violence because it was the only currency they ever taught me. I am good at it, better than anyone should be, and I feel little remorse because the world I operate in doesn't reward compassion. And yet you are being compassionate with me. Am I? Or am I just hesitant to add your name to the long list of things I have already destroyed? Does the difference matter? I don't know. And that was the stark, raw truth. Dominic couldn't understand why Serafina's terror was the one thing that had ever pierced his defenses. He couldn't grasp why her fear felt different from his enemies. He had no reason for why the thought of forcing her will felt like a damnation for his own soul. They looked at each other across the table, two souls caught in a pact neither had chosen, both trying to find a way forward. What do we do next? Serafina finally broke the quiet. Now, we find a way to exist in this space without destroying one another. That's the grand plan. It's the beginning of one. The rest we'll figure out as we go. The faintest shadow of a smile touched her lips. You don't strike me as a man who figures things out as he goes. Normally, I don't have to. Most situations can be controlled. This, he gestured to the space between them, this is an unknown map for both of us. Indeed. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't comfortable or peaceful, but it was no longer a war. It was simply two people starting to see the person behind the part they were forced to play. I need to leave, Dominic said, standing. Matters that can't wait. Victor will stay. If you need anything, he'll see to it. Victor, your head of security? The same. He looks like a brute, but he is... Dominic searched for the words. He is a good man. You'll be safe with him. Safe? She spoke the word as if tasting it for the very first time. Understood. There's food in the kitchen. Feel free. The television works. Books are in the study. The gym is on the second floor. This is your home now, too. My home. Her gaze swept the sprawling penthouse, as if she were truly seeing it. I don't know how to have a home. What are you talking about? For my entire life, I have lived in my father's house, by my mother's rules, playing the part I was assigned. I've never had a space of my own, not one moment that wasn't choreographed or watched. Her eyes met his. I don't know how to just exist without being told how. The admission hit him with a force he was not ready for. Then you will learn. You have time now, all the time in the world. And when you get back, when I get back, we'll have dinner, we'll talk, we will keep figuring this out. He went to the door, then paused. Serafina, I meant it last night. I will not hurt you, physically. Ever. That is not what this is. Then what is it? To be honest, I'm still trying to figure that out myself. He was gone before she could respond, the elevator doors sliding shut, sealing her inside with her own bewildered expression. As he descended, Dominic felt the immense pressure of his own words. He had made promises he wasn't sure he could honor. He had offered a mercy he wasn't sure he possessed. He had tried to be a man he had never been. Victor was waiting in the lobby, leaning against a wall, arms crossed. How did it go up there? She knows about the money and about her father's part in it. How did she take it? Better than I had any right to expect, and far worse than she ever should have had to. Dominic moved for the exit. She's alone up there. Watch her. Stay discreet, but make sure she is safe. You think she'll run? I think she could disappear in other ways. Just be gentle. Victor's nod was all the confirmation required. Where are we going? We are going to speak with Aldo. At last, a cold smile touched Victor's lips. Do I need the tools? Not for this. This is a conversation, but he will understand it's the only one he gets. They cut through the city's shifting facades of wealth and industry. Aldo's office was high in a midtown tower, a place that stank of old money, fighting to seem new. Dominic had been in this office once before during the original negotiation. Back then, Aldo was all smooth handshakes and bright promises. This meeting would not be the same. The elevator climbed to the 14th floor. Aldo's secretary, a nervous woman in her 50s, made a weak attempt to stop them, but one hard look from Victor made her dissolve. They walked in on Aldo laughing into his phone. The sound died in his throat when he saw Dominic's face. I have to call you back. The line went dead. Dominic, I wasn't expecting this. I thought our business was concluded. It was. Now we're discussing the new terms. Dominic fell into a chair without being asked. Victor filled the doorway, a human bulwark. I'm afraid I don't follow. The $3 million you were paid for your daughter. It now comes to us. The blood fled Aldo's face, then rushed back in a blotchy, furious tide. That is not on the table. The contract stipulated that money. You cannot simply, I can do precisely what I want. Your only decision here is if this goes smoothly or if it becomes difficult. The contract got you the money. It never said you would keep it. Dominic leaned back, a picture of absolute disinterest. Call it a loan we're collecting. A loan with an agonizing interest rate. This is just theft. No, it is business. Theft would involve me threatening your life for the cash. I am simply notifying you of an amendment. Aldo stood, straining for an authority he had lost. I will fight this. I will take legal action. The contract holds. You could try, but you should ask yourself, do you really want a war with me over the price you got for your own flesh and blood? Dominic's voice became a blade of ice. Because I can promise you, Aldo, you will not win that war. You won't even survive it. The threat saturated the air, heavy and suffocating. Aldo deflated into his chair. A man suddenly hollowed out. Why are you doing this? The deal was final. Serafina agreed. It was finished. Serafina was compelled. She did not agree. There is a vast difference. She was given an option. She was given the illusion of an option. It is not the same thing. Dominic leaned forward. You used your own child as a bargaining chip and pretended it was for the family. You terrorized her into it using her sister's future. You let her think she was saving everyone when you were only saving yourself. And you got rich from her sacrifice. I did what was necessary. No, you did what was convenient. The move that let you sidestep the consequences of your own mistakes. Dominic stood up. The money is gone. My people will contact yours with the payment schedule. You will be paying this off for the next 10 years, with interest that will make you hate the memory of every dollar. I don't have that kind of capital. You have the shipping lanes now. Then I suggest you figure it out. Be inventive. Isn't that what you told Serafina when you sold her off? That desperate situations call for great sacrifices. Dominic started for the door. Now you get to find out what that feels like. Wait. Aldo's voice was a dry rattle. My other daughters, my younger ones? The protection you promised them is still in place, isn't it? Unlike you, I don't make children pay for the sins of the father. Dominic stopped at the doorway. But let's be crystal clear, that protection is for them and them alone. If you get out of line, cause problems, or so much as think of Serafina without my direct permission, Our next meeting will be very different. She is my daughter. She was your daughter. Now she is my wife. And I, unlike you, will treat her as more than a number in a ledger." He left Aldo sitting there paralyzed, a mask of rage, terror, and maybe the first hint of shame. Victor was silent until the elevator doors closed. "Do you feel better?" "Not one bit." Dominic stabbed the ground floor button, but it had to be done. "So what's the plan for her?" "For Serafina? I have no idea. You've gone soft for her? I hardly know the woman, but you're concerned for her. Or at least you don't want her hurt, which in your world amounts to the same thing." Dominic said nothing. Victor's words were true. Some piece of Serafina had found a crack in his armor, forcing him to question beliefs he'd held for a lifetime, forcing him to want to be someone else. The problem was whether a man like him could ever truly transform. Could someone whose life was built on violence and intimidation ever be a person a broken girl could trust? He had no solutions, just more questions that got heavier each time he saw the pain in Serafina's eyes. Her every flinch in his presence was proof of her trauma. Every strained attempt at calm a thin shield he saw right through. When Dominic returned to the penthouse, he found Serafina in the kitchen. This time she'd made a meal. Pasta with sauce from a jar, a salad put together with more determination than skill. She had her back to him, her tense movements tracing the edges of her new gilded cage. "That smells incredible." She jumped, spinning around with a wooden spoon held like a club. Seeing him, some tension left her, but the caution in her eyes was a permanent fixture. "I made food. I didn't know when you would be back. She gestured toward the stove. "There is enough for two, if you're hungry." "You were not required to do that. I needed something for my hands to do." Victor showed me my way around the kitchen. She went back to the stove, stirring a pot that didn't need it. "He has a surprising gentleness for a man who looks like he could rip a phone book in half. He can be." Dominic undid his tie, the day settling like a stone in his chest. "What did you two discuss?" "Literature, mostly." He noticed my interest in your library and suggested a few authors. I never would have guessed he was a reader. Few people do. They only see the scars and his size, and they think that is his whole story. Serafina put down the spoon, serving the pasta with precise, controlled motions. "Is that how they see you, too? Do they just see the monster and think that's all you are?" The question caught him off guard. I don't waste time thinking about what others see. But you do sometimes. She held a plate out to him, her eyes downcast. "If you were completely indifferent, you wouldn't have told me the truth about the money, about my father. You would have let me go on believing the lie I'd already swallowed. Maybe I just needed you to see your father for what he is. Or maybe you needed me to see the man you want to be." She finally met his gaze. "So which one is it?" Dominic took the plate and walked to the table. "I don't know yet. They ate their meal in a heavy silence." The pasta was plain, but the act itself meant more than the food. Through the glass, the sunset bled across the Hudson in streaks of orange and purple. I spoke to my mother earlier. Serafina's voice was almost inaudible. "I used the phone in your study. I hope that was all right." "That phone is yours, too. You don't need to ask permission. Force of habit." She poked at the food on her plate. I called to tell her I was adjusting well, that things were fine. What did she say? She asked if I was holding up my part of the deal, if I was keeping you happy, if I had. Serafina's voice cracked. If I had done the duty she trained me for, the one a wife does on her wedding night. Dominic set his fork down, and your response to her? I invented a fiction. I assured her that events unfolded just as she planned, that I was playing the part of a dutiful wife. She glanced up, her gaze shimmering with the tears of pure outrage. The truth was something I couldn't give her. I couldn't admit my own husband has treated me with more respect than my mother ever did, that the very monster I was raised to fear is the only one who has bothered to ask me what I want. Serafina. She sold me too. Can't you see that? She called it a family necessity, my fate. But she stood with my father and convinced me it was some noble sacrifice. All along, she was grooming me to be. The word caught in her throat. To be used, that was the point of every lesson. How to bear it, how to be quiet and invisible and obedient. How to exist as property. My apologies. Don't be. You are not the architect of this arrangement. You are simply the man now holding the title. She shot up from her seat and started clearing the plates, even with Dominic still eating. My mother inquired about a visit to bring my new spouse to meet the family. She wants to parade me around. Proof that her grand bargain paid off. You are under no compulsion to go. Oh, but I am. My sisters are still in that house. I have to see them to ensure they are safe. She turned on the tap, her movements jagged with rage. Besides, don't you want to inspect your investment? To prove to the family that you own their daughter now? Isn't that how this game is played? This isn't a game. It's not. You agreed to this union for shipping routes and new territory. Politeness doesn't change the nature of the deal. She scrubbed a dish that was already spotless. I am still the asset you bought, the cost my father was prepared to pay. Dominic rose and moved toward her, keeping a deliberate space between them. You are absolutely blazing with fury. Of course I am. I am incandescent. I am. She brought the plate down on the counter hard enough to fracture it. I'm so full of rage I can barely breathe. At my father for selling me, my mother for helping him, and myself for being too terrified to say no. At him for this whole disaster, even as he pretends to be a savior. At all of it. She was spiraling into a dark place. He cut through it with a single command. Then be wild. Break something if you need to. Her gaze flicked to the cracked plate, then to his face, questioning his meaning. Absolutely, this is your home. If shattering things brings you relief, then shatter them. We can always buy more dishes. She stared at him like he was insane, and maybe he was. But it was a better form of madness than letting that poison eat her alive. Serafina watched him, a tangible change coming over her. In one fluid movement, she snatched the plate and threw it at the wall. It exploded, the sharp sound of its destruction echoing in the room. She was breathing hard, staring at the damage in disbelief. A noise escaped her, a broken, hysterical laugh caught in a sob. Oh my God, she had just thrown a plate. He asked. Better? She answered. Actually, yes. That felt. And she laughed again, a single tear cutting a line down her cheek. That was incredible. He held out another plate to her. She said, No. But maybe. The young woman sank to the floor, surrounded by the porcelain shards of her own defiance. She had never broken anything on purpose, never allowed herself that kind of anger, always told to swallow it. Be nice. Don't make a scene. As Dominic got a broom and started sweeping, he made a vow. You can raise a storm in here. You can shout. You can break every last dish if it gives you peace. And he meant it. He completely meant it. She watched him sweep up the fragments of her fury, a moment of deep stillness in the chaos. She then questioned, "Why are you being so decent to me?" He was blunt. "I'm not a good man. Ask almost anyone, they'll tell you, but you are, with me." "Why?" After sweeping the pieces away, Dominic leaned on the counter. "Honestly, I don't have a clue. Maybe because watching you hurt is a price I'm less willing to pay than any crooked deal I've ever struck. Or maybe I'm tired of being the villain, or maybe I see you were handed a terrible fate, and the least I can do is not make it worse." She saw through him. "Those are all strategic answers. What is it you actually want from me?" For him to claim some deep feeling. They had been married for 2 days, but she pressed, "You feel something, or none of this would mean a thing." He knew she was right. The truth of it settled deep in his bones. For 20 years, this man had methodically removed emotion from his life. People were tools. The world was a chessboard. And now this woman, a business asset on paper, was stirring feelings he had buried long ago. He changed the subject sharply. "We should set some ground rules. Things you can live with, things you cannot. Your hard lines." Serafina pulled her knees to her chest. "Like what?" "Physical touch. I know you don't want me to touch you. I will respect that. But for appearances? If we need to look like a couple, can I put a hand on your back or on your arm?" She had to truly think about it. "If you warn me first, if I know it's for show, I can handle it, but nothing unplanned. And that's it. No hugs, no kisses." He agreed. "Understood." "And our living arrangement? Do you want a separate room? Is that a choice I have?" "The choice is completely yours." Yes. She needed her own space, a room where she could lock the door and just be. He responded, "Done. There are 3 empty bedrooms. Pick one, we'll move your things." She looked completely stunned. "It's that easy? It's that easy? Anything else? I need to work or volunteer. I can't just sit here all day waiting for you to come home like some—" Her voice broke. "Like some prize? What is it you want to do?" She had no idea. She'd never been allowed to think about it. Her parents' whole plan was for her to marry a rich man and keep a house. That was her entire future. A sharp, humorless laugh escaped her. "I guess they got the marriage part right. The rich part, anyway." He asked her what she was studying before her world fell apart. Education. She had a secret dream of becoming a teacher. For little kids. Her whole face softened as she spoke. "I adore children. Their honesty, their sense of wonder, the way they see things before life makes them cynical." His answer was immediate. "So be a teacher, but I don't have a degree. I had to drop out when my father's business failed. We couldn't pay for it. Money isn't a problem anymore. Finish your degree, get your license, or volunteer while you decide." Dominic took out his phone. "My assistant can set up meetings with some schools. You can see which one you like," she asked. "You're not kidding?" "Why would I kid about that? You want work, so go work. Your life didn't end when you married me." Serafina stared at him as if he'd grown a second head. "This makes no sense at all. My own father pawns me off to a mob boss who then turns out to be a champion for female empowerment?" He corrected her. "I'm a champion of what's convenient. Your being miserable and bored helps nobody. You having a life is a better look for both of us." She places him in the category of dangerous men she's known, and finds he is the most peculiar. When he asks about the size of her sample, she concedes it contains just 2, him and her father. Her father's type of terror, she says, wasn't about broken bones, but the quiet, systematic erosion of a person's spirit. Dominic notes that either way, you end up with scars. Agreeing, she stands, collects herself, and requests to ask something personal. He allows the question without promising an answer. She asks about his family, if there's anyone he loves. He thinks of his Aunt Teresa, the only family at their wedding. A single aunt, he says, whom he calls maybe twice a year, that's all. His parents are dead, his father at 19, his mother a few years later. She begins to offer sympathy, but he cuts her off. He makes it clear his father was a brute, fueled by liquor and rage, and his mother enabled him with her silence. Their passing, he says, was no loss to him. This admission makes Serafina move closer to him for the very first time. She asks if the shared background of being powerless is why he gets it, why he tries to be different. Maybe, he admits. He understands the helplessness, another person controlling your life, feeling unsafe in the one place you should be safe. His eyes meet hers. He remembers the promise he made leaving that house, to never be weak again, to never give that power over to anyone. She then points out the great irony that he now holds that exact power over her. He agrees with the truth of it, saying that's precisely why he's trying so hard not to use it. A constant battle. Her gaze was a challenge, forcing him to acknowledge the dominion he held over her. He knew a lie would be an insult. The marriage contract, he admitted, was a legal cage her father had forged, granting him nearly absolute power. But her question was not of law, but of will. If she disappointed him, would he unleash that final authority? The word no was a ghost on his tongue, a comfort he could not offer in truth. He confessed to his own darkness, to savage acts born from lesser provocations. He could promise no transformation on words alone. She received this truth with a slow nod, her gratitude a strange, somber thing reserved for his brutal honesty. He had given her the truth, he reminded her, when a lie would have been a kindness for most men. But he was not most men. A faint smile graced her lips as she conceded the point. In the days that followed, a strange new quiet settled between them. Dominic would vanish before sunrise into a world of business she knew not to question. She would trace the contours of their gilded cage in the mornings. Her afternoons were lost to phone calls with schools, following a strangely helpful tip from Victor's wife. Evenings brought them together for dinner, the silence between them slowly giving way to hesitant conversations that grew less fragile with each night. Serafina chose the room at the corridor's end, the one whose windows met the dawn. Her possessions arrived, moved at Dominic's unspoken command. She began to leave small traces of herself in the space, a book on a table, a jacket on a chair, minor rebellions of life that warmed the vast cold rooms. On the fourth day, Marcus arrived like a storm front. Dominic was in his study when Victor's voice cut through the intercom. Chen was here. It was an emergency. Marcus strode in, his face etched with strain. They had to discuss the Colombo problem. Dominic waved it off, but Marcus stood firm. The Colombos were agitated over the shipping lanes, claiming an encroachment on what was Vale's old territory. It was not Vale's anymore, Dominic stated flatly. It was his. This, Marcus explained, was precisely the issue. They had a lucrative arrangement with Aldo. With that revenue stream gone, they were growing unpredictable. A familiar rage stirred in Dominic's chest. He cared nothing for their agitation and vowed he would not negotiate. Marcus warned that a choice might not be an option unless he wanted all-out war. Dominic scoffed. He knew war. Not this kind, Marcus said, his voice dropping low. Not with a wife whose safety was now in the balance. The word struck a nerve. Dominic moved to the window. Marcus continued. They knew about Serafina. The whole city knew, and some now saw her as a point of weakness. While Dominic's retribution for any harm would be legendary, Marcus noted, vengeance is no comfort to a ghost. Marcus drew closer, his aim not to provoke fear, but to reawaken the strategist. The Dominic he once knew would have anticipated this, would have planned for it. But that man was not burdened by a heart. The implication that he ignored collateral damage earned a sharp retort. Marcus watched him, confused by the change since the wedding, this new dangerous distraction. Dominic insisted the situation was handled. Marcus voiced his doubts, suggesting sentiment was now guiding him instead of strategy, a fatal error in their world. At that moment, his phone buzzed, an unknown number. He opened the message to a single image that froze the blood in his veins. A photo of Serafina taken from a distance just hours ago. The shot came from a vehicle across the street. A message sent without a single word. "We have a problem," he said, turning the screen to Marcus. The text was mere seconds old. He swept like a shadow into the living room where Serafina was lost in a novel. She looked up at his stormy expression, and her own composure cracked. "What is it?" she asked. He told her they needed to speak about her security detail. When she asked why, he revealed she was being watched, showing her the photograph that had arrived 5 minutes ago. The blood drained from her face as she tried to understand who and why. Because, he said, his voice a sheath of ice over a core of fury, they see you as the lever to break me. This new truth, he announced, required a complete revision of her life. "So, I'm a prisoner?" she shot back. He rephrased it as a need for constant protection. A team victor was already gathering. Serafina rose, her book falling to the carpet with a soft thud, her voice firm. "No!" She had just started to feel a sliver of freedom and refused to surrender it. He declared the point was not negotiable. She countered that everything was, reminding him of his promise to give her choices. That promise, he replied, was made before she became a target on a board. She argued it might not be a threat, but his voice hardened into steel. "It is a threat." He knew this play. The first move is to show you they have access. The next move, he left unsaid, would not be a photograph. From the doorway, Marcus interjected, confirming his assessment. "He's right, Serafina. This is deadly serious." She accused him of siding with Dominic. Marcus replied he was on the side of her survival. He then turned to Dominic, adding that she also had a point. To lock her away was to become her father. The comparison hit Dominic like a physical blow. He turned back to Serafina and asked for her proposal. "I want to be safe," she said. "But I have to be a person, not a treasure locked in a vault." When he asked for a compromise, she offered one: security when she was out, but freedom from watchers in the house, a small claim to a normal life. "I will not be a captive in this house," she swore. "Done," he agreed, "but Victor's protocols will be followed to the letter. You report where you go. You take no foolish risks." She translated coolly. "Because my risk is your liability." He countered with an unplanned, raw truth. "Because I do not want you to be harmed." The unvarnished confession stunned her. "Is that difficult to believe?" he asked. She just stared, admitting that what truly frightened her was the chance he might be sincere. His monstrosity was a simple thing, easy to hate. But these glimpses of the man beneath, she whispered, wrapping her arms around herself, they twisted everything. Sensing the shift, Marcus quietly slipped out to check the perimeter. A crushing silence fell between them. Seraphina's voice, when she finally spoke, was barely a whisper. She confessed she did not know how to exist in this space, how to be his wife while fearing what he was, how to accept protection that only marked her as his greatest weakness. She questioned how she could ever trust him when her entire life had trained her not to. He gave her no false solace. "You should not trust me," he said. "Not entirely. I'm not a good man. I am trying to be better for you, but better might not be in my nature." She found this less than comforting. "It is the truth," he said. Defeated, she sank back into her chair. "Yes, it is." The shrill ring of Dominic's phone tore the fragile moment apart. "Victor," came the voice on the line. "We have the vehicle from the image. A traffic camera got the plate. It belongs to a Colombo lieutenant." Dominic's command was simple. "Bring him in." When asked if the acquisition should be quiet or a show, Dominic's gaze fell on Seraphina. So fragile, so frightened, yet so defiant. "Loud," he ordered. "I want it understood what happens when they touch what is mine." He ended the call, his eyes finding hers. She knew what that command meant. "You're going to hurt someone," she stated. "Perhaps kill them, over a picture." He explained the photograph's purpose. It was a test of his boundaries, and he had to prove those boundaries were defended by death. She rose, a silhouette against the dark window. "This is your world," she said softly. "Violence and threats." He confirmed it with a quiet, "Yes." "And now I belong to it." Again, "Yes." She then demanded a promise. He had to swear that what came next was from necessity, not from rage or a need to display power, but for a reason. Dominic closed the distance between them. He laid out the grim math. The photo was a signal that she was within their reach, a piece they planned to play. If he did not respond with overwhelming force, every rival he had would see her as a viable target. That, he said, was the reason. He asked if it was necessary enough for her. After a long pause, she gave a slow, anguished nod. The brutal logic of their life settled with a chilling clarity. This, she felt a need to correct, was the truth of their union. She reminded him of their vows, the contract that had sealed her in this life. His memory was a predator's, recalling not her words, but her terror. To her, every syllable was a stone in the wall of her prison, a nightmare made flesh. She now faced him with the reality of her entrapment, a cage built by the very men meant to be her guards. This was not a complaint, but a cold, hard fact. Her life as his wife was now simply leverage for his enemies, and her protectors were now her jailers. A bleak elegance defined her paradox. Seraphina's crisis was not an attack on Dominic, but an existential tear where safety had become the same as a cage. His phone's sharp buzz was a summons from the brutal world that funded their lives. A man, Danny Costa, was in custody and refused to talk. Her observation of his departure was not a question, but a flat statement of fact. He was leaving, not just to ask questions, but to dissect a man for answers, using pain as his tool. Turning to the window, she saw her existence reflected back, a prisoner in a fortress, a fate she deemed as unjust as his. That injustice, he might have countered, was precisely the point. As she walked to her room, she made a final appeal, not that he change his nature, but that he find no satisfaction in it. She urged him to preserve a sliver of humanity, to hate the suffering he was forced to inflict. The door's click served as a verdict, leaving Dominic in the aftershock of a conflict he hadn't known was being fought. The Red Hook warehouse stood like a cathedral of ruin, its quiet perfectly shaped to hold a scream. There, Danny Costa was presented as a problem, his beaten state a mere prelude. His identity was basic, an agent for a rival, Marco Colombo. Danny Costa was expendable, a street-level soldier of no real value. The issue was not his identity, but whose orders he followed. His cover story of simple reconnaissance for Marco was instantly discarded. As Dominic drew closer, Danny's defiance proved to be a paper-thin shield. The man's frantic request for a lawyer was met with contempt, a sharp reminder that civil laws did not apply here. In this place, rights were non-existent. The only forces at play were Dominic's will and the breaking point of Danny's body. The option given was not freedom, but a choice between two orchestrators of his end. His invocation of rights was met with a swift, punishing strike that awakened the predator in Dominic. This was his territory, ruled by the language of violence. He restated the vital question: who designed this operation? Under pressure, Danny's narrative crumbled, revealing the truth. He was tasked with watching the girl, Serafina, to chart her movements and find her weaknesses for Marco Colombo. The goal was plain. Marco, angered by his losses, was planning his retaliation. Danny's ensuing silence confessed the deeper, unspeakable part of the plot. The strategy was to use Serafina as a weapon to wound Dominic. This unspoken truth earned Danny another blow, the sickening report of bone-grounding Dominic in his grim work. This violent rite brought him a disturbing clarity. When asked for a timeline, Danny could only gasp that it was coming soon, that Marco was assembling his crew. Victor, Dominic's lieutenant, confirmed the confession was genuine. With the truth extracted, Dominic's order was clinical and final. Get rid of him. Danny's desperate reminder of a bargain was met with a cold correction. The promise only covered what would happen if he said nothing. Cooperation came with no guarantees. Dominic left before a final plea could be formed, stepping into a night that felt like a physical impact. The tremor in his hands was not from fear, but the toxic surge of power and violence, a mix that left him feeling both absolute and hollow. A text from Serafina shattered the quiet. Her question, "Did you get what you needed?" was a jarring intrusion of the mundane. His one-word reply was met with another, more piercing query, "Are you okay?" The question's sheer normalcy was absurd. His brief promise to be home in an hour was answered with the offer of dinner, a simple exchange that illuminated the fractured reality they were building. When he returned, her eyes took in the proof of his work, the scraped knuckles, the empty expression. Her direction was simple and without judgment. Wash up. As he scrubbed the blood from his skin, a useless act to cleanse the deed itself, she made their seal. They ate in a heavy silence, in a shared space where the violence that paid their bills was a forbidden topic. She never asked about the blood, the warehouse, or the man's fate. Instead, she offered sustenance, a gesture of normality on a day that was anything but. Then, with a practiced lightness, she announced her own news. She had called a volunteer group about teaching children to read in Brooklyn. She confirmed the start date for the following week, adding that Victor was already organizing the security. The woman in charge, she said, was wonderfully ordinary, happily unaware of her new volunteer's real identity. This anonymity was not a hurdle, but a deep relief, a fleeting chance to just be Serafina, unchained from her past or her title. She then extended the same chance to him, to be just himself in their home. Her gaze, however, held a tragic understanding as she asked the defining question of their life together. Was that even possible, given the violent truth of who he was? She admitted her daily fight to exist without despising him, and in turn, herself. The sight of him returning with blood on his skin made the charade of normalcy an agonizing act. He responded not with a falsehood, but with the raw truth of his world. He had no desire to act like a man he wasn't. Her frustration crested. She confessed she didn't know what she wanted, only that she was lost in the brutal life he led. In response, Dominic pushed his plate aside and gave a chillingly direct report. The man from the warehouse, the one plotting with Columbo to harm her, had been permanently removed. He added, without any remorse, that he did not regret it. Serafina received this news with a stillness that showed a mind being forcibly reshaped. Her answer was not a moral judgment, but a detached analysis. An ordinary man would feel regret, but he was not ordinary. Therefore, an ordinary reaction was not to be expected. While clearing the table, she drew a fine, crucial line. She did not excuse his actions. She could grasp his brutal logic without ever approving it. Understanding, she stated, was not acceptance. She could see the mechanics of his violence, but she would never be at peace with it. What then did he require of her? His silence admitted he was unsure, save for a deep-seated need for her to stop being afraid of him. He was seeking a truce to make their shared confinement bearable. He finally asked for time to establish the terms of their bizarre union. She countered with the harsh truth. They were two people trapped in a contract. But then she echoed his unasked question. What more could they be? For a second, she met his gaze, imagining a future that was maybe just less painful. She offered a new approach, to stop defining their relationship and just exist day by day. Before vanishing into her room, she gave a final, surprising acknowledgement. She saw that he was trying, even when she couldn't find the words to match his effort. The click of her door this time was not a retreat, but simply the end of a long day. Dominic stayed behind, caught between the city's glow and the darkness of his own actions. He saw a flash of violence, then the face of a woman trying to find humanity in a world he had built to destroy it. His entire empire was founded on the unyielding principles of fear and the utter destruction of weakness, and yet his greatest threat was now a 22-year-old woman whose look held both hope and terror, a silent demand for him to be better. The very idea seemed absurd. Could a man who spoke only violence learn the language of kindness? Could someone who had built fortresses for 2 decades now tear them down for a virtual stranger? He had no answers, only stained hands, a hollowness that violence no longer filled, and a growing fear that Serafina Vale was changing him in ways more terrifying than any enemy he had ever known. For 2 weeks, they moved through a fragile choreography of mutual avoidance. Serafina found a delicate sense of purpose in her Brooklyn volunteer work, telling him stories of children whose spirit was stronger than their reading skills. At their dinners, Dominic would listen, feeling a raw instinct to guard the light in her voice, a remnant of the person she was before his world took her. Victor's security detail were phantoms, their presence a constant, unfelt pressure. Serafina learned to ignore them, a city dweller's trick for tuning out sirens. She was carving out a space of almost normalcy in her cage. But peace in their life is only ever an intermission. The break came on a Tuesday, when Marco breached their quiet without an invitation. Trouble erupted. Dominic shot to his feet. Serafina! It was not her. It was her younger sister. Someone had made a move on her near the school. The air in the room turned to ice. An attempt? Our people intervened, but the window was slim, dangerously slim. Marcus's face was a mask of granite. This is a severe escalation. Dominic was already dialing, his actions a blur of violent purpose. Put Serafina on lockdown immediately and bring Marco Colombo to me. Boss, grabbing Marco means open war. So be it. They do not touch the children. Ever. The line went dead. Marcus watched him, concern radiating from his posture. You need to think about this. A war? Over what? Over a 10-year-old girl whose only crime was her father's cowardice and whose sister became my wife. Dominic grabbed his coat. This is exactly what I told them would happen. They push the boundaries. I answer with absolute destruction. That is the rule of the game. That game is over. Serafina is now a variable in all your plans. If you go to war, she becomes their #1 target. She already is the #1 target. The photograph proved it, and this move against her sister confirms it. Dominic strode to the door. The only way to guarantee her safety is to inspire a terror so complete they fear the very air she breathes. Or, you could talk. Find a middle ground with Colombo. There is no middle ground with men who use children as weapons. Victor is on the line. Serafina is secure and inbound. She's asking questions. Tell her I will explain everything when I arrive. This news is going to devastate her. She is already a wreck over her sister. Then keep her contained until I am there. Dominic was inside his car as it tore away from the curb. And find Marco. I don't care how. The drive to the penthouse was a silent eternity. Dominic's thoughts fractured, racing through scenarios of failure and catastrophe. He knew this marriage would cause friction, that her family was now under his protection. But the idea of that danger was nothing against the raw, visceral shock of a child almost being taken. When he walked into the apartment, he saw Serafina prowling the room like a caged animal. She spun on him as he cleared the doorway. Is Emma safe? They said she was, but I have to hear her voice. She is untouched. She is with your parents, under a heavier security detail. She has no idea what almost happened. What do you mean she has no idea? Someone tried to take her. Our operative intercepted them before she was even aware. For her, it will seem like new bodyguards are taking her home. That is all. Serafina went perfectly still. Guards? 10-year-olds do not have guards. This one does, and so does your other sister. This can't be real. Her hands flew to her temples. This is all my fault. I brought this down on them. No. Your father started this with promises he couldn't keep. He used you as a bargaining chip to hide his mistakes and made your sister's leverage. Dominic took a single, measured step closer. None of this is your fault, but it is happening because of me. They want to hurt you, so they are using my family as the blade. That is correct, and I will make damn sure it is the last time they ever try. She met his gaze, her eyes a storm of fury and terror. How? By killing more people? By starting a war that will swallow more innocent lives? By drawing a line so deep in the earth that no one dares to cross it? And you are the one who decides where that line is? In this world, yes. Serafina drifted to the window, wrapping her arms around herself. I have to see them. Not now. Not until I am 100% sure the threat is neutralized. And when will that be? When Marco Colombo has been handled? Handled? She whirled around to face him. You mean killed. Just say the word. You are going to kill him, if it becomes necessary. And what if his death makes everything worse? What if his people retaliate? What if more children are put in danger? They will not be. Not after I am done. You can't know that. I understand the dynamics of this life. Unflinching, brutal strength is the only dialect men like Marco speak. To back down now is to broadcast weakness. Showing them your family is a vulnerability is an open invitation for attack. Every enemy I have will see a way to get to me through the people you care about. Serafina was engulfed in a long, crushing silence. I hate that you are right. I know. I hate that this savagery is our only path forward, that we can't handle this like civilized human beings. Marco threw civility away when he sent a killer after a child. So did you. The second you took a life, the moment you chose power over principle. She held up a hand to stop his protest. I am not defending him. I am saying you both live in a world where children are just collateral, where fear is a tool and violence is the only conversation, and I am trapped between you. Then tell me what you want for me to let this go. So you would rather wait for them to grab Emma on their next try? That is impossible. Her control was shattering. I don't know what I want. I want my sisters safe. I want to stop living in constant fear. In a perfect world, a 10-year-old wouldn't need bodyguards, but we are not in that world. No, we are not. So do what you must. Protect them, protect me, unleash whatever violence is required. Her voice became brittle like ice. Just do not ask me to approve of the monster it makes you. Dominic's phone buzzed. It was Victor. We have Marco. He is demanding to talk to you. I will be there in 20 minutes. He is insisting on a one-on-one, neutral ground. Just you two. Boss, it is a setup. Probably, but he says he has intelligence. Information he claims you need before declaring war. Dominic weighed the options. Set it up. But I want surveillance on everything. If he breathes wrong, you take him out. He cut the connection. Serafina was just staring at him. You are actually going to meet him? Yes. Is that a good idea? Not really, but I have to hear what he has to say. You mean you have to look him in the eye while you decide whether to kill him? She saw right through the pretense. Yes. In that case, I am going with you. Absolutely not. Why not? Because it is a suicide mission. Every single day of this life is a suicide mission. If I am there, I can see what happens instead of staying here and imagining something infinitely worse. Serafina, this is not a negotiation. I am telling you, I am going. You demand that I understand your world. Then let me see it. The whole thing. Not some filtered reality you think I can stomach. Dominic's first instinct was to refuse, to lock her in the penthouse and keep her safe. But the steel in her eyes promised she would just find another way to be there. And maybe she had a point. Maybe she had to see the filth to understand why he fought this way. Fine. But you stay in the car with Victor. You do not get out. You do not say a word. You are only a witness. Agreed. The meet was set for a warehouse in Queens, a derelict structure in an industrial dead zone. Dominic rolled up with Victor and two other men. Serafina a shadow in back of the SUV. Marco was already there, leaning against a black sedan with three of his own people. Stay put, Dominic told Serafina. No matter what you see, I will. He stepped out of the truck. Marco watched him approach, his face a complete blank. Virelli, I'm surprised you came. You have 5 minutes to tell me why I should not kill you right where you stand. Because I am not the one who targeted your wife, sister. The words stopped Dominic cold. You are lying. Am I? Think about it. What do I gain from starting a war with you? You took my shipping lanes, yes. I am angry, but I'm not stupid enough to provoke a war over a route with such slim profits. Then who was behind the photograph? Who sicked Danny on Serafina? Danny was on my payroll, true, but he was taking money from a second source. Someone who needed you to think I was the enemy. Someone who wanted us to wipe each other out so they could sweep in and take over both our empires. Dominic felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Who? Your new father-in-law. The name hit him with the force of a punch. Aldo. He has been playing us both from the beginning. He approached me months ago. I was to cause trouble, make you look weak, and he would give me the lanes once you were in power. He even said his own daughter would help from the inside. Serafina knows nothing about this. Yes, I am beginning to realize that. Aldo's plan was a masterpiece of treachery. He meant to bury you in outside conflicts, letting your marriage crumble from your failure to protect her family, thereby voiding your whole deal. He could then tear up the contract, take back his organization, and I would have been in place to claim your territory in the ensuing chaos. Dominic's hands balled into fists, his knuckles white. You have proof? Marco held out his phone. The screen displayed the full architecture of the betrayal. Messages, locations, and meeting times, all from Aldo's private channel. He sent Danny to take that picture and to pin it on my crew. Then he orchestrated the attempt on the girl to push you into a war with me. Marco's smile was a shard of ice. He would let his own blood be collateral just to sever your ties. It was a coldness that bit deep, even into men like them. A searing rage coiled in Dominic's gut. Why show me this? I will not be a piece in another's war. And Aldo Val is a cancer in our business. He needs to learn the meaning of permanence. Marco pocketed his phone. Let us be clear, we are no allies. We are not. But our war is not inevitable. Not over this. What is your price? I need Aldo removed from the board for good. And I want a minor stake in the shipping lanes. A fee sufficient to close this account. Dominic weighed the truth. His gut screamed trap. A masterful manipulation by Marco. But the proof on the screen was undeniable. The reasoning was twisted, yet held a terrifying logic. Aldo was exactly the type to offer his children as sacrifices to save his throne. I will think on it. Do not delay. Aldo is already plotting his next gambit. Next time, it will not be a warning. Next time, a child might actually disappear. Dominic pivoted, striding back to the SUV. Through the tinted glass, Serafina's face was a ghostly reflection. He dropped into the seat next to her. Go. Victor pulled away. 3 blocks bled by in silence before she spoke. What did he say? Dominic pulled out his phone, his thumb finding Aldo's contact. Your father has used us both as puppets, staging attacks on you to force a war between Marco and myself, trying to shatter our union to reclaim his empire. No, he couldn't. Dominic turned the screen to her. He watched her face crumble as she absorbed her father's words, each message another layer of treachery. Oh God, her voice fractured. He approved Emma's capture, agreed to let her be harmed, just to be rid of me, to void our contract. But Emma, Sophie, they're his own flesh and blood. Her hands shook uncontrollably. What kind of beast wagers the lives of his children? The kind who views them as currency, as pawns in his game. Dominic retrieved his phone. I am sorry, do not be, not for revealing what he is. I should have known. When he traded me away, I should have understood his other daughters meant nothing, that we were never people to him. What do you need from me? Her gaze met his, and he saw something shift within her. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I need you to guard my sisters. For real. Not from shadows. From him. From our father. That would require taking him out of the equation. I understand what it means. Her voice was unyielding stone. He will never stop using us. He will keep putting them in harm's way. While he lives and feels cornered, Emma and Sophie will never be safe. Serafina, are you telling me to? I am telling you to do what you do best. Eliminate the danger. Her eyes held his, unwavering. I am telling you to kill my father. The sentence hung in the car, absolute and final. Dominic scanned her face for a trace of doubt. The girl who recoiled from him a fortnight ago was gone. In her place stood a woman forged in betrayal who knew that blood ties could be poisonous. You are certain? He sanctioned Emma's abduction. He orchestrated attacks against me. He sold me, then tried to ruin the one good thing that came from it. You, honoring your promise. Her jaw was set. I am certain. This act is permanent. It cannot be reversed. You will carry the fact that your husband murdered your father. I already carry the fact my father tried to harm his own daughters. This is just an evening of the scales. Dominic drew his phone, tapping a quick message to Victor. It will appear accidental, cardiac arrest, no connection to you or your sisters. The theatrics do not matter, only their safety does. The car stopped. They rode the elevator in shared silence, the gravity of their packed and unseen passenger. Inside, Serafina moved to the glass, a silhouette against the city. I am a horrible woman. The words were a ghost of a sound. I just sanctioned my father's death, and I feel numb. You are not horrible. You are defending those you love, by turning into you, by choosing violence as the only way. You are nothing like me, am I not? I just perform the same grim arithmetic you do every day, valuing one life over another, making force the final word. She turned from the window. The only thing separating us is your experience. I chose this path. You were pushed onto it. Does it matter how we got here? The result is the same. My father will die by my decree. I weighed his life against my sister's, and his came up light. Dominic stepped toward her, but kept a careful distance. If you expect an apology from me, you will be disappointed. That is the fractured truth of who I am. I am not backing down. He needs to vanish. My sister must be safe. I need, her voice caught. I need this to end. And if this makes me a monster, then so be it. You are not a monster. You are a survivor. Is that the story you tell yourself after you have ended a life? After the pain and the ruin, are you merely surviving? Sometimes. The rest of the time, I am precisely what I have always been. A monster. Yes. At last she turned, and for the first time in a fortnight, she closed the space between them. She stood close enough for him to feel her heat, to see the flecks of gold in her eyes. I do not think you are a monster. You should. I know. But I do not. You could have harmed me countless times, but you have not. You guarded my sisters, though it threw your world into chaos. You fight to be a good man, wrestling with every deadly impulse you have. Her hand rose, slowly, deliberately, an invitation for him to retreat before resting on his cheek. Maybe you are just a man who was never offered another way. Dominic remained still, her touch searing his skin. It was the first touch born of choice, not of terror or duty. The first time she sought proximity instead of distance. Serafina. A part of me is still afraid of you. I think it always will be. But I am starting to see how the beast and the man are intertwined, how you are both brutal and unexpectedly soft, a danger and a shield, that perhaps no one is ever just a single thing. What changed your mind? I saw that my father was the greater monster. The man who was my guardian would trade his children for wealth, while you, the nightmare from my youth, offered more humanity in 2 weeks than he did in 2 decades. Her hand dropped from his cheek. It turned my definition of a monster inside out. A vibration from Dominic's phone, a silent death knell. A text from Victor. Done. Val's vehicle went off-road on the way home, hit a retaining wall. Instantaneous, tidy, as ordered. Dominic absorbed the words, their finality setting like concrete in his marrow. He had ended lives, given the orders, pulled the trigger, and slept soundly. This was different. This was her father, whatever he had been. A threshold was crossed from which there was no return. He offered her the screen, watching her eyes take in the message, watching her realize her father was gone forever, and her decision was the instrument of his death. No tears fell. A long, weighted silence, then a sharp, certain nod. Good. How do we tell my sisters? Your mother will manage it. She will phone you tomorrow. It will be reported as a terrible accident. That is all. And the services? You will attend. You will play the part of a daughter in mourning. The facade is important. Facade? A harsh laugh escaped her. My entire life has been a performance. Be pretty, seem grateful, act as if my world was not ash. I am done performing. What do you want then? The truth, however ugly, however much it hurts. She sank into the sofa. For Serafina, her father was not someone to grieve, but a vile man who saw his daughters as commodities. His end was the inevitable price for a man who fought gods he could not defeat, wrapped in a fatal pride. This was the raw truth she refused to mask with false sorrow. When Dominic sat across from her, their new world took shape. Her sisters will be sad, he said. They are young, she answered. They remember a phantom. Let them mourn their illusion. But her eyes found Dominic's, demanding a harsher truth. Aldo was a monster, she admitted, just a different breed from the man she now faced. When he asked what kind of monster he was, she answered, the kind who never lied to himself about what he was. You don't bother to dress your malice in virtue, she noted. Your cruelty is honest, unlike his greed, which wore the mask of family duty. She folded into herself, knees to her chest, confessing a strange comfort in his brand of darkness. A thick silence filled the room, sliced by long shadows of amber and ink from the dying sun. Outside, the city's rhythm was indifferent to a man's silent death, the hardening of a young woman's soul, and a dark pact, born from a contract that was slowly forging a true alliance. I should feel crushed by this, Serafina breathed into the quiet. I ought to be shattered, but all I feel is free. Is that wrong? He replied that he was the last man to ask about morality. Perhaps such ideas are a luxury. Perhaps all that exists is the will to survive, to do whatever it takes to see another sunrise. A bleak filter for the world, she murmured. I am the wife of a gangster who just arranged for my father's death, she countered. Bleak feels about right. A ghost of a smile grazed Dominic's lips, a nod to her grim humor. It seems a vital survival skill in your world, she said. Our world, he corrected. The word was a constant reminder, she thought, of her status as an outsider. Yet this was her reality now, in sickness and in health. The thought held the faint echo of a wedding vow. Indeed, she mused, those promises. She rose and drifted to the window. Can this ever actually work? She asked the glass. Can we be a husband and a wife without all the chaos that surrounds us? Honestly, he said, no. I think the chaos is the foundation. We come from two completely different realities. But maybe we can learn to ride out the storm as one. That sounds far from romantic, she observed. Our beginning had no romance, he retorted. Why start pretending now? She pivoted from the window. Her gaze on him softened with something new. The most bizarre part of all this, she said, is that I'm starting to feel safe with you. Not in spite of the violence, but because of it. I know you would burn down the world to keep me from harm. That you would do monstrous things. Especially monstrous things, he confirmed. That isn't safety, Serafina. It's merely being the prized possession of a very dangerous man. Maybe that's all safety has ever been, she countered. Being valuable enough that someone will protect you. Being cared for enough that someone else is willing to become the monster for you. She moved back to the couch, erasing the space between them, a quiet testament to their shrinking emotional divide. Thank you, she said, for protecting my sisters, for dealing with my father, for trying to make this nightmare bearable. You are thanking me for killing your father, he stated, his tone flat. I'm thanking you for keeping your promise. There's a difference. Dominic just watched her, this woman who was adapting to his shadowed world with a fortitude she might have once used in a gentler life, finding her footing on ground, designed to make her fall. She met his stare, seeing the killer and the man, and flinched from neither. You have more strength than I gave you credit for, he conceded. I'm only just finding it myself, she answered. When you stop being afraid of everything, you discover you can endure more than you ever imagined. Even this, even just surviving, no matter the price. My father, she remembered, always said I was weak. Too delicate, too emotional, too innocent. I think he was wrong, Dominic said. Fatally wrong? Or maybe, she considered, this strength is only here because it has to be, because this life requires it, because you showed me that to survive, you must make the hard choice. She studied him. Is that what made you? Were you someone else before all the violence changed your shape? I started out as someone small and afraid, he confessed. Violence made me strong. And once I had that power, I swore I would never be weak again. And now I am still strong. I am still dangerous. But for the first time, I have started to wonder if that is all I am. What else could you be? The question lingered in the space between them. Dominic didn't have a reply. He had never considered an alternative, never imagined a life outside of building his kingdom, with fear as his scepter in an endless war for power. But sitting with Serafina, watching her metamorphosis from a piece on the board to something more formidable, something that wouldn't break, he felt the first crack in his own foundation. A new path appeared, that he could be a protector without complete annihilation, that his power could serve a purpose beyond its own existence. Someone who might eventually be worthy of the fragile trust he saw taking root in her eyes. I don't know yet, he said at last, but I'm willing to find out. She reached out, her hand closing gently over his. The motion was small but seismic, the first time she had initiated contact that wasn't born from fear. Then let's find out together, she offered. Two damaged people trying to become a little less so. That had to be worth something. Dominic looked at their clasped hands, the sharp contrast of her unmarked skin against his scarred knuckles, her fragile hope against his violent past. None of it made any sense. Their situation was impossible. And yet it was starting to have its own strange logic. The funeral was exactly the kind of production Aldo would have wanted. Garish, dramatic, and filled with people who loathed him but showed up anyway. Serafina stood flanked by her mother and Dominic, dressed in black, her face a perfect mask of sorrow. She was acting a part she'd mastered in her father's home. Emma and Sophie sobbed into their mother's shoulders, their grief real and sharp, and the sound of their tears twisted something painful inside Serafina. She felt zero guilt for her choice, not one bit. The pain was for a father who was a ghost, an ideal that never really was. "Are you holding up?" Dominic's voice was a low rumble for her ears alone. "I'm fine. Let's just get through this." After the service, Marcus gave his rehearsed sympathies, calling her father a difficult man. Serafina shot back. "That's one word for it," feeling no need for politeness with a man who knew exactly what kind of beast Aldo had been. He commented, "You're handling this with remarkable poise." She replied, "I've had a lifetime of pretending my world wasn't burning down. This is just another Tuesday." Marcus looked at her with a flicker of new respect, saying, "You're tougher than you look." Her eyes found Dominic's. "I'm learning from the best." After the burial, the mourners convened at her mother's house. Catherine was giving a masterful performance as the heartbroken widow, and the crowd performed their parts in return. Serafina watched her, wondering how much her mother knew of Aldo's plots. Later, her mother trapped her in the kitchen. "Serafina, we need to talk about your father's estate, the businesses." "What about them?" "They're all gone. The lawyers say your husband owns almost everything now." The marriage agreement gave Dominic full control. Catherine's impeccable facade finally cracked. "We have nothing left. The house has multiple mortgages. The bank accounts are empty. He left us with nothing." Serafina felt not a shred of pity. He got what he deserved. "You could talk to Dominic. You could ask him to help." "Help you, after my father tried to use me as a bargaining chip to start a war." Catherine's face went white. "What are you talking about?" A harsh laugh escaped Serafina. "Father was plotting with Marco Colombo, setting up attacks on Emma and me to break my marriage and get his power back. He was willing to sacrifice his own daughters to get out from under Dominic's thumb." "No, he wouldn't do that." "He did, and Dominic has the proof." Serafina moved a step closer, her voice like shattered glass. "So, no. I will not ask my husband to bail out the family that sold me, then tried to ruin the one good thing that came from it. You're on your own, Mother, just like you left me." "I was preparing you for life." "You were training me to be a doll, a piece of property that wouldn't fight back." Serafina's voice was arctic. "And I learned my lessons very well, just not the ones you meant for me to. I learned that family is a lie, duty is a prison, and the only person who actually protects me is the man you told me to be terrified of." Catherine reached for her, but Serafina flinched away. "Don't! You chose Father's side. You told me to endure when you should have told me to resist. Now you can live with the consequences." She turned and walked straight back to Dominic, who took one look at her face and understood. "We're going." He didn't ask why, just steered them out of the toxic air. In the car, Serafina finally let out a breath. That bad? My mother wants cash. She thinks I should beg you for a handout because father left them with nothing. And your answer? He inquired. That she can deal with it. My days of managing their chaos are over. Dominic absorbed this in silence. If you intend to see to your sisters, my sisters are children. The contract shields them. They are secure. But my mother, she made a choice. Now she bears it. You've grown colder, he remarked. I have grown practical. There is a distinction. Her gaze fixed on the passing streetscape. I did have a competent mentor, after all. I am not sure how to take that. It wasn't an insult, it's a reality. She turned to face him. Can we please go somewhere else? Not the penthouse. Anywhere but that place. A place that isn't poisoned by this. I don't care where. Just somewhere I can breathe. Dominic gave the driver a new destination. They arrived at a park, a perfectly ordinary space. Seated on a bench, they pretended they weren't the scions of violent legacies. I continue to wait for the guilt, Serafina said quietly. For my father, for making the call. But I feel hollow, as if a piece is gone, but I don't know what it was. That's not unusual. Grief is complex, even for someone you loathed. But is this grief? Or only the silence where the hurt once lived? Perhaps it is both. When Dominic laid his arm along the back of the bench, the very architecture of their dynamic shifted. He offered not a story of grief for his father, but of relief, a final freedom from pain. This confession unlocked the intricate cage of Serafina's own sorrow. She grieved not for the man himself, but for the father she was never given. Within this shared emptiness, her posture eased, and she leaned into his sphere, asking if their damage was too great for any semblance of a normal life. He affirmed that normalcy was never part of their inheritance. She pressed on, questioning if an escape from their fated parts was even conceivable. The world she imagined was one of total reinvention, new names in a town unmarked by their bloody history. Dominic, a man forged by this very history, dismissed it as a comforting fantasy. Still, she held to the beauty of the idea. Her asking if he could abandon his identity went to the heart of their impasse. His stark honesty confirmed he was trapped. His whole existence rested on that foundation, and he could imagine no other self. He conceded, however, that she had introduced a startling possibility. Could a world exist beyond the calculus of power and fear? Her question, what else is there, hung in the space between them. Their quiet study of a normal couple was like peering into a foreign world they could see but never enter. Serafina then pulled them back to the concrete future, announcing she had been accepted into New York University's education program. To him, it was a good thing. To her, the simple act of wanting something, of planning beyond survival, was profoundly disorienting. She gave voice to the psychological whiplash of her new existence. A month ago, her only goal was eluding death. Today, she was designing a future. The sensation was foreign, laced with a hope that felt dangerous. In her world, hope was simply an open door for more loss, a weakness waiting for an enemy. He argued that not everything is taken, but her life had taught her otherwise. Safety, innocence, people. This existence was a merciless thief. Dominic had no counter to this truth. The only question left was how to face it, with passive surrender or with defiance. Maybe, she suggested. The only point was to build things, even knowing they would be torn down. The question then became about them. Were they building something together, or just two survivors sharing wreckage? He turned it back, asking for her view. She described it as a cautious dance, learning how to exist in the same space without destroying each other. Her prior hatred had vanished, replaced by the understanding that he was not the monster she had conceived. When he asked what he was, she depicted a complex man, deadly yet not cruel, violent but with reason, holding immense darkness and also a capacity for true concern. She saw past his strategic reasoning that she and her sisters were assets to be protected, to the more fragile emotion it concealed. It was a vulnerability he could not hide from her. Faced with her insight, the defenses he had held for 2 decades began to fail. He confessed the truth. The change, he said, happened somewhere in the storm of their union, between her ruin on their wedding night and her resolve as she condemned her father. In that fire, she stopped being a line item in a contract. Her reply was dry. That's hardly romantic. They agreed on the complete absence of romance, a mutual understanding that drew a rare, real smile from her. Theirs was no fairy tale. It was something else, perhaps stronger, built for their fractured world. In the weeks that followed, their life together found a new cadence. The apartment, once a sterile tower, was now alive with the intellectual fervor of Serafina's studies. She would come home talking of teaching methods and the children she tutored, pulling the outside world into their gilded prison. Dominic's position started to change from that of a silent watcher to an engaged audience. He found himself absorbed not by market reports, but by the fire of her newfound purpose. This was a seismic shift. The office, his throne of power, now felt like a tomb. And he began leaving early, not out of duty, but from a simple wish to be near her. He would ask about her day, his interest authentic. Then, nearly 6 weeks after Alda's funeral, Serafina came to his study, suggesting she could sit with him quietly while he worked. Her own room, she admitted, felt too vacant. He wordlessly granted her request. She took the couch, and a peaceful silence settled over them. An hour later, he saw she was asleep, a book on her chest, her face relaxed in a way he never saw when she was conscious. The sensible thing was to wake her. He chose instead to drape a blanket over her, and her presence transformed the cold office into a haven. He fell asleep on the other couch, a quiet protector. She found him there when she woke. Her question of why he remained was met with a simple, resonant answer. He had not wanted her to be alone. The admission struck her as the kindest thing anyone had ever done for her. He called it a low bar, and she agreed with a soft smile, accepting the warmth of the act. After that, the last walls between them started to crumble. Small intimacies, his hand on the small of her back, her moving closer at the dinner table, became effortless. Even her laugh, an uncommon sound, started to appear, sparked by his grim humor. He was drawn deeper into her orbit as they pieced together a shared life. But their world is built on predation and is without forgiveness. The inevitable breach came as a Tuesday call from Victor, his voice strained with alarm. A warehouse in Red Hook was hit. 2 men were dead, and $500,000 of product had vanished. As Dominic readied himself to go, Serafina stood before him, her fear now deeply personal. She attacked his belief in his own invincibility, demanding not arrogance, but true caution. The fire in her gaze forced his honest agreement. The warehouse was a portrait of professional violence. The bodies were covered, the surveillance feeds wiped. This was the work of skilled operators, not petty criminals. Dominic's first question was of responsibility. Victor confirmed what they saw. The raid was surgical, requiring intimate knowledge of their security measures. The breach had to have come from within their own ranks. 15 minutes on, Marcus arrived, stating the strategic threat. A loss of this size broadcasted weakness. The directive was simple: find the traitors and make an example of them. The command was issued to harden all positions and to trust no one. For 3 days, Dominic sank into the city's underbelly, hunting for a ghost. The truth, when it surfaced, was a gutting betrayal. The mole was Tommy Ricci, a man by his side for 8 years. Tommy was thought to be a devoted soldier, among the very few men Dominic trusted without question. He demanded proof. Victor showed him footage of Tommy meeting with the buyers. The cause, it seemed, was a loan Dominic had refused 6 months before. He had a dim memory of the meeting. Tommy's daughter needed a costly experimental therapy for a rare disease. Seeing it as a purely financial matter, Dominic had judged it a bad risk and turned him away. The result of that cold calculation was now clear: betrayal and the murder of 2 loyal men. The man he used to be would have ordered a swift and public end. But now something made him hesitate. He asked for Tommy's whereabouts and went to face the man, finding him battered in a cold, wet basement. Seeing his boss, Tommy's defiance broke into a flood of desperate pleas. Dominic silenced him, demanding if he truly thought he could avoid the fallout. Tommy spoke of his desperation, his dying daughter. The treatment was $300,000, and with his plea for aid rejected, he saw no alternative. He confessed his crime, but cast it as the desperate act of a father who could not bear to watch his 8-year-old child die. The words hit Dominic with physical force. A month prior, he would have killed him without a second thought. But now he saw Serafina's face and understood the impossible choices of those backed into a corner by fate. You owed me a second appeal, a clear report of the matter. It was an emergency. I tried 3 times. Your man said you were unreachable. The words hit with the weight of a physical strike. Tommy had not been idle. With no other recourse, he had taken a desperate path. The men you put down, they had souls. I know, Tommy whispered, his voice an echo. That is a debt I will carry always. But my daughter was dying, and she is my whole world. Dominic pulled out his phone and made a call. How much for the treatment Tommy Ricci's daughter needs? $300,000. Wire the entire sum to the hospital now. Tommy could only gape, disoriented. What are you doing? Your girl gets her medicine. You get to live, but you are finished in this city. You will be gone. You will start a new life, and you will not come back. If I sense you in my city again, I will complete what I started here tonight. Is that understood? I don't get it. Why? Because I am trying to be someone other than the man I was. Because my wife has shown me that mercy isn't weakness. Because you are a father who made an awful choice to save his child. And I can't punish that without becoming the monster they claim I am. Dominic motioned to Victor. Let him go. Make sure he and his family are gone before sunrise. Boss, just follow the order. Victor did, but his face declared that Dominic had finally snapped. Perhaps it was true. In their world, compassion was just another name for being insane. But Dominic was tired of being a man whose only talent was destruction. When he got home that night, Serafina was waiting. A single look at him told her something had fractured. Tell me. And so he did. He laid out the tale of Tommy, the betrayal, and the final judgment he'd passed. She listened, her eyes locked on his, and when he finished, she closed the space between them and folded him into her arms. It was the first time she had ever initiated the contact. The first time she gave comfort, instead of just receiving his protection. For a beat, Dominic was rigid with shock, before he slowly, hesitantly returned the embrace. "You made the right choice," she breathed against his chest. "Did I? I let a traitor who stole from my house just walk away." "Who killed my people? That does not make me right. It makes me exposed." "No," she countered. "It makes you human. It makes you a man who understands that people are not just numbers on a balance sheet, but broken, desperate souls fighting to survive." She leaned away enough to find his eyes. "It makes you someone I think I could truly learn to love. In time." That word, love, hung in the space between them, vast and terrifying. They had never said it, never dared to approach it. But now it was there, fragile, real. "In time," he echoed, his voice raw. "I'm not there yet. I'm still learning you. Still trying to know if this is genuine. But I believe it could be. One day. If we keep going this way. If you stay this person, not the one you were made to be. What if I fail at this? What if that madman decides to return for a second round? Then he will have me to answer to. But my wager is he will not. I see you changing. Maybe not all at once, maybe with mistakes, but it is enough. It is enough for me to imagine a future past simple survival." Dominic pulled her close once more, feeling her surrender into him. "I have no idea what I am doing," he admitted. "How to be with a person, how to care and not see it as a liability. I do not either. Then we will learn together. We will fail and we will fix it. Then we will find new ways to fail. It is the human way. But what if I bring you pain, not with my hands, but with the very thing that I am? Then I will be in pain, and we will face it. But you are already trying harder than anyone in my life ever has, and the effort is worth more than perfection." In the middle of the room, they just held each other, two broken people learning how to be whole together. This was not a fairy story, no children's romance, but something gritty, real, and built on ground far stronger than fantasy. The contract that had begun it all was lost in a drawer, its legal words a pale ghost. What they were building now was not made of ink, but of will. A hard, chaotic, and beautifully imperfect choice. In the months that came, they kept building. Serafina got her degree, then her teaching license, landing a job at the school where she had once volunteered. She would come home, drained but shining, wearing glitter and ink to tell Dominic of 6-year-olds who had finally cracked the code of their first words. While he listened, a pride for her grew in his chest, one that had nothing to do with possession. He started the immense task of pivoting his business without completely abandoning it. He was not so naive as to believe he could just cut himself off from that world, but he started to change its direction, pushing money from dark enterprises into legitimate ones, using his power as a shield instead of a club. The whole thing was a slow, vicious fight against enemies who never quit. But Victor stayed true, and Marcus helped him chart the brutal new course. Bit by bit, the organization began to look less like a syndicate and more like a damaged but powerful force for good. For a time, when Catherine's world fell apart, they had Serafina's sisters stay in the penthouse. Emma and Sophie flooded the pristine apartment with loud teenage energy, and Dominic was shocked to find that he enjoyed the chaos. He got pulled into helping with homework, learned the bizarre drama of junior high, and became the uncle they so badly needed. When Catherine finally hit her lowest point, drunk, broken, and completely alone, it was Serafina who offered mercy. It was not forgiveness, nor was it a reunion, but it was enough to get her into a treatment facility. It was enough to save her life. In their world, this was mercy, not forgetting the past, but simply choosing not to destroy everything. 1 year after their wedding, the marriage contract was up for review. The lawyers put it in front of Dominic, filled with clauses for renewal and changes. He looked at the paper, his mind flooded with everything that had occurred since he first put his pen to it. Then he tore it into pieces. His lawyer watched him, absolutely stunned. "What are you doing?" The move voided every single clause, killing the contract. "The shipping lanes, the turf, they are mine, with or without her. I do not need a piece of paper to hold what I've built." Dominic got to his feet. "Prepare the dissolution papers, a clean break." "You are divorcing her." "I am giving her a choice. She was never given one before. She will get one now." He went home that night with the papers in his briefcase. He found Serafina at the kitchen table, absorbed in marking papers. She glanced up when he came in. "You look grave. Is something wrong?" "Nothing is wrong, but we need to talk." He set the papers on the table. "Our marriage agreement was up for renewal. I voided it." All the color drained from her face. You want to end this?" "No, I am giving you that power. The contract that trapped you is gone. You are free to leave if you want. There will be no strings, no payback. Your sisters will be kept safe. You will have what you need, but you will be free." Serafina stared at the documents like they were poisonous snakes. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you never had a say. Your father traded you, and while we have built something good from it, it started without your choice. Now the choice is yours. You can choose to stay or you can choose to go. Whichever path you take, it will be yours alone." "And if I leave?" "Then you leave. I will not stop you. I will not make things difficult. You have earned the right to have your own life." She picked up the papers, her eyes scanning the legal text. Dominic just watched her, seeing the silent war inside her as she weighed the freedom he was giving her. Finally, she put them down. "I am not signing these, Dominic." Her voice was like steel. "I'm not signing them because I don't want a divorce. I want to stay here, not because a paper commands it, but because I am choosing to. Because what we have built is important to me, because you are important to me." She rose and came around the table until she was right in front of him. "I love you." I can't tell you the exact moment it started. Maybe it was somewhere between you tearing down my father's world and you saving Tommy Ritchie. But it's the truth. I love you. And I choose to be your wife, your partner, not your prisoner. Dominic felt a final wall inside him disintegrate, a defense he didn't even know was still there. "I love you too," he confessed. "I have no idea how to do this right. I will probably mess it up constantly. But I love you more than I ever thought was possible." It was then that she kissed him. For the first real time. Not the empty act from their wedding, but a kiss made from a powerful choice. He answered it with a gentle reverence, holding her as though she were sacred. This was no claim of ownership. As their embrace ended, tears streamed down her face, born of joy, not the familiar sting of fear or sorrow. "Is this what we're doing then? Freely choosing this?" "If you'll have me," he said, his voice low, "knowing there is a darkness in me that will never fully fade." "I'm not looking for perfection. I want you, the broken pieces and the ones trying to mend, nothing less." "Then you will have all of me." They stood there, caught in the quiet chaos of the kitchen, surrounded by homework and contracts now rendered meaningless. A man and a woman, born from a sterile contract, had stumbled upon something real. This was a story no one would have ever written for them. What they shared defied all romantic convention. It was a landscape they had carved out for themselves. It was tumultuous and raw, founded on brutal honesty rather than beautiful falsehoods. That evening, the world shifted on its axis. For the first time since they were bound by paper, Serafina did not seek the solitude of her own room. Instead, she took his hand, guiding him to a chamber that would now belong to them both. Their union was deliberate and tender, a culmination of a year spent building fragile trust. The ghosts of her past lingered, flickers of old fear, and he had to fight the man he used to be. Yet because it was real and freely given, it was worth more than any perfect lie. Her voice, a soft question in the dark, found him as they lay together. "Do you regret it? The contract, the way we started?" He met her question with the stark honesty that now defined them. "I only regret what it cost you. The terror, the freedom you lost, everything your father did. But I can't regret the road that brought me here, to this, to you." "And I to you," she whispered back. "It was a nightmare, but I can't regret it. It forged me into someone strong enough to know what she wants and fight for it. Someone who could take on a dangerous man and not be broken by him." "Is that what you're doing? Taking on a dangerous man?" "Exactly. And you're holding a woman who learned to be dangerous herself. It seems that's what we do for each other. We make each other stronger, never weaker." "Yes," he confirmed, the word absolute. "It is." Sleep took them tangled in each other's arms, a profound, unbroken peace they had not known since their beginning. No ghosts haunted the darkness, only the quiet comfort of two souls who had fought the world and chosen each other. The years that followed were a trial by fire. Ghosts from Dominic's world refused to stay buried. Old enemies, unpaid dues, the constant threat of violence. But they faced every storm as one. Serafina brought the fierce determination of a teacher to his world of shadows. He, in turn, learned to value her safety over his own need for control. They fought often, learning the boundaries of their separate selves and how to speak through the fire. Their daughters, Emma and Sophie, grew up in a fortress of love, blind to the darkness of Dominic's life and their grandfather's legacy. For the girls, the world was now simple. Serafina was happy, Dominic was family, and they were finally safe. He began to dismantle his old world, rebuilding his empire with a facade of legitimacy. A complete cleansing was never possible. Some stains refused to wash away, but it was enough to offer him solace and for her to see a man reaching for the light, not one dwelling in darkness. For their 5th anniversary, Dominic took her back to the park where they had stood after her father was buried. They sat on that same bench, watching the water, 5 years gone and 2 lifetimes changed. Then Serafina broke the silence. "Do you remember what we talked about here? You asked me if I would ever just disappear, start over somewhere new. And what's the answer now?" He gave the thought its honest due. "No, not anymore. This life is ours. It is broken and messy and dangerous, but it is ours. I don't want to run from it. I want to keep building it." "So do I." She leaned her head against his shoulder, a simple comfort that would have been impossible on that first terrible night. "We did all right, didn't we? For 2 people who started as a business deal." "Better than all right. We built something real from the wreckage of a nightmare. That's no small thing." "No," she whispered. "It's everything." They stayed until the light faded, a reflection of their vigil 5 years ago. But when they left, they were going home together, not to a prison, but to a life they had forged themselves a contract of ink rewritten on their souls. Their ending, it should be said, was not a fairy tale. There was no perfect solution or storybook ending, just two broken people learning to love in the ruins of their past. They had transformed a vow, born of fear, into a bond of their own making, powerful and true. In a world built on power, violence, and betrayal, this was the ultimate act of rebellion. Dominic Varley lived by a brutal code. Power was everything, kindness was weakness, and love was a liability. Seraphina Vale, in turn, had survived by believing she was only a tool, that safety was found in being unseen, and that love only ever led to pain. When their worlds collided, those convictions were shattered. They learned that real strength is found in being vulnerable, that mercy takes more courage than violence, and that true love means seeing everything. It is seeing someone's deepest flaws and ugliest moments and choosing to stay. The paper that started their story is now just a worthless relic from another life. But their bond endures, held together not by a signature, but by shared will. And that single choice, made again every day in small acts and great tests, has a worth no contract could ever define.
Life lesson: trauma does not merely wound behavior, it reorganizes perception, attachment, and identity until survival itself begins to resemble love. From a psychological perspective, the story of Dominic Varley and Seraphina Vale is not merely a romance shaped by criminal power. It is a case study in coercion, trauma adaptation, attachment restructuring, and the destabilizing moral effects of asymmetrical power. Dominic presents initially as a classic dominance-organized personality. He is not simply violent, he is structurally reliant on control as a method of emotional regulation. Individuals like him often emerge from developmental environments where unpredictability, humiliation, and threat are chronic. In such conditions, the child learns that vulnerability is not a bridge to intimacy, but an invitation to injury. Later in life, this produces adults who experience control the way healthier personalities experience safety. Control is not a preference, it is a prosthetic nervous system. This explains why Dominic's empire matters beyond economics. His criminal authority is a psychological adaptation. His capacity for intimidation allows him to prevent the re-emergence of childhood helplessness. That is why he is effective. He does not merely perform dominance, he believes in it somatically. Seraphina, by contrast, exhibits a very different trauma profile. Her conditioning is not overtly aggressive, but relationally coercive. She has been shaped by a family system that rewards compliance, punishes self-assertion, and moralizes sacrifice. Such individuals often develop what clinicians might call fawn responses rather than fight responses. They survive not by overpowering threat, but by becoming useful to it. They anticipate needs, suppress discomfort, and internalize the belief that harmony depends on their self-erasure. This is why her terror on the wedding night is so psychologically significant. She is not merely afraid of Dominic as a man, she is responding to what he represents within the meaning system imposed on her: entitlement, possession, inevitability. Her fear is predictive. She assumes harm because her caregivers prepared her to expect it. In trauma terms, her body is not overreacting, it is executing the script it was trained to trust. The first lesson emerges here with clinical clarity. People do not respond to present circumstances alone. They respond to the meanings their nervous systems have learned to assign to those circumstances. What destabilizes Dominic is not her fear itself, but the quality of it. Criminal men are accustomed to instrumental fear. Rivals fear consequences, debtors fear punishment, associates fear disappointing them. Seraphina's fear is different. It is developmental fear, the kind associated with helplessness. It positions him not as a negotiator or predator in a game, but as an all-powerful figure in a closed system. In other words, she experiences him the way a child experiences an unsafe parent. This distinction is psychologically devastating for Dominic because it confronts him with the emotional meaning of his own power. Her reaction activates shame, and shame is often the first destabilizer in previously rigid dominant structures. Not guilt, which concerns behavior, but shame, which concerns identity. He is forced to ask not "what did I do," but "what am I to her?" Seraphina's early behavior also reflects a trauma bond-adjacent dynamic, though it must be described carefully. She is not in love with her captor in the simplistic cultural sense. Rather, she is caught in a coercive dependency framework in which the source of threat and the source of potential safety are fused. Her family hands her over. Dominic becomes the figure who can hurt her, but also the figure who can prevent others from hurting her. This fusion is psychologically destabilizing because the nervous system begins orienting toward the powerful person not purely out of affection, but because proximity to power becomes a survival strategy. That leads to the second lesson. When protection and domination come from the same source, attachment becomes emotionally confusing even before it becomes intimate. However, the story does not remain trapped in this condition. That is what makes it compelling. Dominic does something psychologically unusual for a man organized around control. He permits boundary formation. He does not demand accelerated intimacy. He does not collapse her personhood into contractual access. Repeatedly, he creates space where her refusals survive. This is profoundly important. Trauma recovery often begins when the nervous system collects enough evidence that boundary expression no longer results in retaliation. In ordinary language, one might call this kindness. In clinical language, it is the restoration of agency conditions. Serafina's panic attack in the kitchen is a major diagnostic moment. Panic at that level usually indicates cumulative threat processing rather than reaction to a single event. Her body is not responding just to Dominic's presence. It is responding to weeks, years, perhaps a lifetime of anticipatory submission, moral pressure, and unprocessed fear. Dominic's response matters because he does not intensify the panic by asserting authority. He regulates the moment through verbal pacing, distance, and non-contact reassurance. He becomes, however imperfectly, a co-regulating presence rather than an invasive one. This is the third lesson. Healing becomes possible when a person in power chooses regulation over intrusion. The father's role is equally significant. Aldo functions as a narcissistically organized manipulator. He converts others, including his daughter, into extensions of his self-preservation needs. His moral vocabulary, family duty, sacrifice, is not evidence of ethics. It is camouflage for exploitation. Such personalities often generate intense confusion in their children because cruelty is packaged as necessity. This leads the child to question her own perceptions. Was it abuse or was it responsibility? Was it betrayal or was it survival? Was she used or was she helping? When Serafina sees the monetary terms attached to her marriage, the ambiguity collapses. This moment matters because trauma often persists less through pain itself than through interpretive confusion. Once the victim accurately identifies exploitation, dissociation begins to decrease. Rage becomes available. Grief becomes coherent. Agency becomes imaginable. That is the fourth lesson. The mind cannot heal from what it is still forced to misname. A further complication arises when Serafina ultimately authorizes violence against her father to protect her sisters. Morally, this is disturbing. Psychologically, it is unsurprising. Individuals emerging from prolonged coercion often undergo what might be termed a protective hardening phase. Once helplessness breaks, the pendulum may swing toward decisive, even ruthless acts in the service of preventing further victimization. This does not make the act simple or healthy. It does, however, make it legible. She is no longer acting from obedience. She is acting from threat appraisal and protective prioritization. Dominic understands this because it mirrors his own developmental logic. He became dangerous because danger was the only language that once guaranteed survival. Serafina's decision reveals that under sufficient pressure, her moral architecture can bend in the same direction. Not because she is becoming him entirely, but because trauma compresses the distance between innocence and severity. Yet the story's most psychologically mature movement appears later, when Dominic shows mercy to Tommy, the subordinate who betrays him out of desperation for his daughter's medical treatment. In his old framework, betrayal necessitates destruction. In the new one, he recognizes contextual desperation. This is not softness. It is the reintroduction of complexity into a mind previously dependent on binaries: threat or loyalty, obedience or punishment, usefulness or elimination. Mercy indicates cognitive expansion. That gives us the fifth lesson. Real change is not proven when a person feels different. It is proven when that person interrupts an old pattern at the exact moment the old pattern would have felt easiest. By the time love emerges between Dominic and Serafina, it is not merely romantic attachment, it is the result of a long psychological reclassification process. She stops perceiving him solely as an inevitable threat. He stops perceiving her as a contractual variable. They become increasingly real to one another, and reality is the enemy of objectification. Still, the healthiest lesson here is not love heals trauma. That would be reductive and dangerous. The better lesson is this: trauma distorts attachment, but repeated respect for agency can slowly restore a person's capacity to choose love rather than merely cling to protection. Serafina's final choice has meaning precisely because Dominic dissolves the contract and returns her freedom. Without that freedom, attachment would remain contaminated by coercion. With it, love becomes ethically legible. In sum, this story demonstrates a psychologically complex truth. People damaged by power often recreate power until someone introduces a new model of relating. Not a perfect one, not a pure one, but one in which boundaries are not punished, truth is not weaponized, and care does not demand annihilation of the self. That is where healing begins. Not an innocence restored, but an agency reclaimed.